Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we are very, very pleased that everyone has come out today. Alhamdulillah, especially during one of the weekend mornings of Ramadan. We are honored to have Sheikh Omar Khan with us. It's my first time I'm sharing a platform with him. As you know, we're here to speak about Zakat. This is one of the pillars of Islam, as we know. And it is probably one of the neglected, I would call it one of the neglected pillars of Islam, because we don't pay zakat like in the regularity that we pray. It comes once a year. And many times there are rules for zakat that we don't learn. So alhamdulillah, I'm very happy that everyone was able to come and learn about these things. And we'll do question and answer. Now, Sheikh Omar, do you prefer Q&A in the presentation or after?
As you wish.
Yeah, I think why don't we do it in?
Yeah, we'll do it in, and that way if people have clarification they're looking for, they get it as they go along.
Yes. So, and sisters can also come down from above or from the side if they want to come to these chairs over here in the main hall. And we'll do Q&A on the topic of what we're speaking about. So if there's a question that you have for something else off the topic, then wait till the end. However, if there's something that we say, like we're on a section on the nisab or we're a section on gold or something, you can bring in your question at that point in time, no problem. Just put up your hand and we can run a mic to you, inshallah. So with that, inshallah, we will begin our presentation in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we'll give it to Sheikh Omar Khan, our guest.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Assalamu alaikum. So, like Sheikh Abdullah said, this is one of the most ignored pillars, unfortunately, in Islam. They'll fast. I think most people fast. Then fewer people pray, and even fewer people give zakat. Unfortunately, it's ignored. And sadly, the people who give zakat, many of them don't know how to give zakat. So it's not done properly. There's a lot of ignorance. People think they know, but they don't know. So alhamdulillah that people made it out to learn about this topic. So let's maybe just start with some quick engagement of why should we pay zakat? Maybe I'd love to hear from the people. Why should we pay zakat? To purify the wealth. And in fact, that's one of the meanings of the word zakat, right? It means to purify or to cleanse. Because sometimes maybe we're doing our business, we're working, but we're not perfect. And so we make mistakes. Maybe we spent too much time in the coffee area. Maybe we, time clocked a few minutes too late. We weren't working at that time. And so zakat helps us purify that wealth. Why else? It's a fard. That's a really good reason. Allah commanded us to do it. It's a fard. That's a really, really good reason. Why else? To help society, because it reduces the gap between the rich and the poor, right? It's one of the Islamic mechanisms of social welfare. So it allows money to flow from the rich to the poor, builds ties between the rich and the poor, and it helps build those connections, because maybe the poor might look at the rich and be jealous or envious. Maybe the rich might be looking down at the poor. But when you're giving zakat to someone in person, it helps bridge that connection, builds those relationships. And when you're giving zakat to the needy, maybe it'll make you pay even more zakat. Like, oh my God, this person's really needed. So it bridges those connections. What else? Purifies the wealth. We talked about that, yeah. It's economically beneficial. It's something that people don't think about, is the concept of money in Islam. What we're supposed to do with the wealth that Allah entrusted us with is we're supposed to do one of three things. We either spend that wealth, we go out, we buy something with it, something useful, beneficial, maybe it's just something we like, it's okay, right? We buy something with it, or we give it away as a gift, as charity, maybe as voluntary charity or as zakat, or we're supposed to invest it, right? We're supposed to put it to good use. And those are kind of the three main things we're supposed to do. Not that we can't have savings, we can have savings for some amount, but the general idea is money should be circulating around. And this is something that the macroeconomists and the microeconomists have all studied, this, and they know that they want people, when the economy needs to be given a boost, what do? They give people cash. They try and reduce taxes, they try and increase the incentives for people to spend money, they reduce the interest rates, because when money is circulating, it creates jobs, it creates beneficial products and services. It's just really good for everybody, all of society, all of economics. So zakat is only on excess wealth. And so it's trying to take extra money that people have and circulate it in the economy so that it provides benefit to society. We talked about it being a pillar of Islam as well. So let me ask, when was zakat put in place? When was it instituted? During the Medinan time? Okay, any other opinions? You know, I like to think of it as happening well before then. Because Isa alayhi salam, what did he say from the cradle? He said, وَأَوْصَانِي بِالصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ, that Allah has enjoined upon me to pray and to give zakat ma dumtu hayya, as long as I'm alive, right? So Isa alayhi salam talks about zakat. Who else? In Surah Maryam, when it talks about وَاذْكُرُ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِسْمَاعِيل, then Allah describes he's true to his word, he's a Rasul, he's a Nabi. وَكَانَ يَأْمُرُ أَهْلَهُ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ. And Ismail alayhi salam used to command his people to pray and to give zakat. So these 5 pillars of Islam, somehow people forget that these aren't just the 5 pillars that the Prophet ﷺ came with. These 5 pillars were there for Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? Because Allah tells Ibrahim alayhi salam, وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ, call people to Hajj. So we can see there's many, many examples, many places in the Quran where Allah talks about this, but the messengers, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam, all of them had these 5 pillars, and zakat has been there. It's a legacy, it's a history. It didn't just come with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that is why Islam was not complete until what? When was the verse when Allah says, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum? When was that verse revealed? Anyone recall? Last sermon, last Hajj, the last Hajj, right? So when the Prophet ﷺ completed his Hajj, that's when the deen became complete. That's when the religion became complete, because these 5 pillars, without them, Islam could not have been complete. So they've been there from the beginning. So many reasons to pay zakat. We don't need to go through, I could probably spend the whole day talking about that, but maybe we should change topics. So, Sheikh, is there a particular topic you'd like to switch to in the topic of zakat to get warmed up here?
No, Bismillah, I think we can go with your order.
Okay.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. But it's one blessing is this, that even though the idea of zakat existed before, what Islam did was to define it. So, in fact, if you look at different religions, every religion basically says you should be charitable. Every religion believes give to the poor. The problem is there's no actual mechanism on how to do this. There's no way to calculate. There's no obligation. So you may have religions who say they're very charitable. Like, for example, the Catholic faith. There's this idea of charity in the Catholic faith. There's an idea in Hinduism of giving alms to certain classes of people. But they don't have a kind of a mechanism that says how much should you give? From what should you give? To whom should you give? How often should you give? And because there's no obligation or requirement, most people, because money, they say al-mal akhun nafs. Money is attached to the heart, to the desires. Money is like the brother of the desires. So if you don't actually sometimes take it out of someone's pocket with an obligation, they won't actually give it. And this is why they say the largest single transfer of wealth, of private wealth from private hands to private hands is zakat on an annual basis. There's no other idea in the world about a voluntary transfer that's not transactional of charity from a private hand to a private hand.
So let's bridge from that into the topic of what's the difference between zakah and sadaqah. So let me ask you guys again, what's the difference? Zakat can only be given to specific categories of people, which Sheikh Abdullah will get into, the categories. So only specific categories of people, versus sadaqah or voluntary charity can be given to anybody you like, Muslims, non-Muslims, any category. Okay, very good. That's a very important difference. Any other differences? Zakat is an obligation, whereas sadaqah is not necessarily an obligation. In fact, it's not an obligation, right? Okay, that's another big difference. There's other differences. What else? Sadaqah can be perpetual. Okay. Also, zakat is a fixed amount. So there's at least a fixed amount that we have to give, right? Like Sheikh was alluding to, there's a calculation, there's a way, there's a method that we have to follow. There's a minimum amount of zakat that has to be given, where sadaqah you can give as much as you like. By the way, don't get confused. Sometimes in the Quran, in the hadith, Allah uses the word sadaqah, and the Prophet ﷺ uses the word sadaqah, but what they mean is zakah. And so sometimes they're used The word sadaqah is used for zakat as well. But now we've kind of categorized and said zakat is the mandatory charity, right? It's the one, I don't even know, I don't like calling it even charity. Charity implies that it's voluntary. There's no voluntarism with zakat. We have to give it. Whereas sadaqah is voluntary charity, yeah. Yeah, so we're here to talk about today is zakatul mal. Zakatul mal is the obligatory amount that we give on our wealth. In addition to that, there's a separate type of charity that we give near Eid al-Fitr or on the day of Eid al-Fitr, which is zakatul fitr or sadaqatul fitr. Yeah, and so the words, the two words are, from a linguistic perspective, from a language perspective, they're synonyms of each other. It could be either, but what we're trying to do is separate and say, look, zakat is the obligatory one, and sadaqah is the voluntary one. Sheikh, you had something to add? Yeah, yeah, true, true, yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the difference between them. Okay, so who should pay? Who needs to pay zakat? That's the next question. Okay, good technical answer. That one? Okay. Yeah, so you have to be Muslim, you have to be sane. How about children? Do children have to pay zakat? Anyone disagree? Okay, very, very Hanafi masjid. So just for awareness, we should know that there's a difference of opinion on this one. The Shafi'is, Malikis, Hanbalis, they said the children do pay zakat. It's only the Hanafis that said the children do not pay zakat. Right? And so if you're following the Hanafi method, then you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so Muslim, sane, adult, right? And then somebody said nisab. What's nisab? What does that mean? Wealth threshold. Okay, so there's a minimum amount of money that we need to have in order to be eligible to pay zakat. And that minimum amount is what? Anyone know? But the nisab is not based on that. The nisab is based on, do you have, yeah, fair enough, fair enough. So nowadays we look at dollars, right? Let's look at US dollars. Sheikh, I know you're used to Canadian dollars, but let's look at US dollars. So zakat, if you have, as long as you have 20 dinars or 200 dirhams, you're supposed to pay zakat. Now, we don't deal with dinars and dirhams, so we convert that into the weight of the gold, right? Which there's some slight difference of opinion. Is it 87.48 grams or 85 grams of gold? Is it 3.0618 grams of silver? Or so there's some difference over there. But it works out to be approximately either $8,000 US or approximately $600 if you use silver. So the question becomes, why is there a different nisab? There's a gold nisab and a silver nisab. Well, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, 20 dinars was equal to 200 dirhams. So there wasn't really a difference. What happened is over time, the value of gold changed much more dramatically than the value of silver did as inflation took effect, right? And so now we have kind of two different values. So if you only have gold or you only have silver, it's easy. You can pay on the specific nisab of that. But most of us, we're not holding on to gold and silver. We might have US dollars, we might have assets that are valued in dollars and so on. So what do? The scholars have differed on this. Personally, Sheikh, I follow the opinion of Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi of using the gold nisab. I don't know if you have a difference on that.
I use the gold standard as well.
Use the gold standard as well. And so it's about $8,000. So as long as we have $8,000 and we've had that amount of money for one lunar year, so for 354 days, that means that's the first time we ever became eligible to pay zakat. As long as we have less wealth than that, we didn't have to pay zakat, right? So by the way, this is another thing to clear up. Zakat, because a lot of people get confused. Zakat is not an income. So it doesn't matter how much money I made this year, last year, the year before. Zakat is, or if I work or I don't work. Some people's like, oh, I'm not working, so I don't have to pay zakat. No, it doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with your income. It also doesn't matter how much I saved last year. Zakat is on everything that I have in my bank account. Okay, and we're going to explain more than just the bank account. But basically, zakat is on all of the wealth that is saved up. So as long as that wealth exceeds $8,000 for the first time, I mark that down, I write it down, I say, okay, that was the 3rd of Muharram, the first time that I had $8,000. And then the next year when the 3rd of Muharram comes, That's the first time I'm going to pay zakat on that. Okay, and then what do I pay zakat on? We'll get into that. Maybe by that time we'll have the slides up as well. But so that's the basic idea: is you have to have an nisab, which is about $8,000 for a period called a hawl, which is 1 lunar year, which is 354 days. And by the way, Allah is so merciful because He's giving us this chance to take our wealth and invest it during that time, right? Because we have a whole year. Maybe some people they're farmers, they have summer crops versus winter crops. Some people are doing trading in clothes. Maybe there's winter clothes and summer clothes and different things. So Allah gives us a full year to invest that money so we can do something productive with it, make some profits. And then after that year, then on that wealth, we're going to have to pay 2.5%, right? So He gives us all of that time to be able to do that. Is the TV working? I can try presenting it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, perfect. So who pays zakat? We talked about that. Okay, how about husband and wife? Who's supposed to pay the zakat? Is the husband responsible for paying the wife's zakat? Every single person is responsible for their own zakat, yeah? Okay.
But then people often bring the question, they say, oh, but I paid on behalf of my wife. Can you do that? Can a husband pay on behalf of the wife? So what they say is, it's a very common situation in many cultures where the husband will just, they may have adult children, sometimes it happens, and he just pays for everybody. Same thing you see with Qurbani, Udhaya. One person just pays for it all. And in reality, as long as they say, as long as there is that intention and permission to do so. And in the case of something like Qurbani or Udhaya, you know that you have an approval. You know that there is like you could say, rida by this. You approve that, yeah, my husband can pay my zakat. Then this is fine. So there's something to keep in mind. You don't have to go back now all those years that your husband paid your zakat because you didn't do it yourself, and now you have to go make it up back, right?
Okay, so maybe let's talk about how do we figure out what to pay zakat on, okay? It's a little bit easier to talk about what not to pay zakat on. So we'll start with that. Okay, so things that we have for personal use, things like our house, our furniture, our cars, our clothing, things that we use on a day-to-day basis. Again, Allah only wants us, He doesn't want to burden us more than we can bear. He's extremely merciful. So zakat is only on the excess that we have, right? Even one of the meanings of the word nisab is to be elevated. Like it's more than what we have that we don't actually need. And so your house, imagine you had to like pay off a portion of your house as zakat every year. You would lose pieces of your house every year, right? That would be very problematic. So no zakat on your house, no zakat on your furniture, your cars, your clothing, anything like that. Even if, by the way, your house is really big, it's like a mansion, or even if you have like a Ferrari or a Tesla Model S Plaid, right? It doesn't matter what you have, right? Whatever car you have, you're driving it, you're using it. Maybe there's other things that you have to worry about, like Allah says in the Quran, وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا وَلَا تُبَذِّرْ تَبْذِيرًا. Like don't be extravagant, don't be wasting your money. Right, so maybe there's other things we might be accountable for if we have like a really big mansion potentially, but you don't have to worry about at least paying zakat on that. It's something that you use, and it's something you don't have to worry about. And then in terms of jewelry, Sheikh, you want to cover this one?
Yeah. He hands the hot potato to me. So there's a difference of opinion when it comes to jewelry. For those who follow the Hanafi school, if the jewelry is worn, you still have to pay zakat on it. There are other opinions where the jewelry that you have for daily use is not eligible to pay zakat, but rather it's the gold that you've put away, it's the gold that you're storing. However, I guess I go by the safer opinion, and unless you have an incredible amount of gold jewelry, it's really not usually for most people it's not really that much, and so you look at the jewelry, but when you're looking at gold and silver, you're not looking at the value of the entire item. So I'll give you an example. If I look at this ring, if I want to calculate, this is a silver ring, right? Now, if I want to know the value, the zakat value, I don't weigh the entire ring because there is a stone inside this ring. And the stone, I don't have to pay zakat on stone. I'm only paying zakat on gold and silver. So here's another question. Do we pay zakat on a diamond? Is there zakat on diamonds? What if I have $2 million in diamonds? Do I pay zakat? Personal use, diamond. No, it's just yours.
personal use in this case.
So this is I mean, you can use this as a loophole, but we don't pay, it's only on gold and silver. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them what you call min jins al-athman. They are inherently valuable. They're a store of value. Remember that all coins used to be gold and silver at one point in time. All coins. So the real true intrinsic money is gold and silver. Now, I'm not going to weigh this entire ring. What I will do is I will look at the amount of silver in this ring, and only based on that, so minus the weight, let's say minus the weight of the stone, I will weigh that. On the matter of gold as well, there's a difference, obviously, in the carat of gold. If you have a 24 karat gold, it's different than if you have a 14 karat gold. And if it goes below, do you remember how many carats if it goes below? I forget. But what happens is it has to be the majority of it gold.
Yeah, 50% or more.
Yeah, 50% or more. Once the carat is very low, then usually it does not qualify as being gold. So if it's an alloy as well, in which there is a mix between gold and brass or gold and something else, then you look at, is it above 50% gold, then it will be counted as gold. And so there are calculations which we won't get into the details of. If you have a detailed calculation of a mixed gold item or a type of low carat that you want to speak about.
Yeah, this difference of opinion is a very famous one. Goes back to the very beginning of time, and it's always existed. Those that say you have to pay on gold, which is, like the Sheikh said, it's the Hanafis and some of the Hanbalis as well. So in fact, for example, Saudi, they pay zakat on gold over there. And they said it's because gold and silver are like money. They're stores of value. Those that said that you don't pay zakat on gold, they argued that, hey, listen, if a man wears a Rolex, then he doesn't have to pay zakat on it. Right? So why, if a woman wears jewelry, do you have to pay zakat on it? It's not consistent from that perspective. So they argue that you shouldn't pay zakat on it. Like Sheikh said, the safer opinion is to pay on it because maybe it's not going to be that much anyway. So that's the safer thing to do, inshallah. So now that we've talked about what we don't pay zakat on, let's talk about what we do pay zakat on. So again, it's the surplus wealth that we have. And so any currency that we have, anything that we call money, whether it's money in my pocket sitting in my wallet, whether it's sitting under the mattress or the pillow, whether it's in the bank account, the checking account, anything like that, all of that money we're going to pay zakat on. Digital currency falls into the same category. That's why I put cryptocurrency up here, because cryptocurrency, there's two ways to view cryptocurrency. The scholars have looked at it two different ways. They either say it's an asset or they say it's money. Either way, when you're holding it, either way, you're going to pay full zakat on the market value. Either way. So there's no difference on that. Now it's different if you have like governance tokens and other types of tokens. I'm talking about like payment tokens here. So if you want to get fancy with the digital currency, then maybe come after the session to ask about that, because that gets more complicated. But these are payment tokens, things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, etc. That's being used for payment purposes. So they're really stores of value from that perspective. So currency, bank accounts, any gold that we have, any silver that we have, that's for investment purposes. Whether it's investment in the ETFs like GLD or SLV, whether it's bars that you have, whether it's coins that you have, these are all things that you hold for investment purposes. All of that is going to have full zakat on it. How about money that I put aside for Hajj? Do I have to pay zakat on that? Yes. Yes, we have to pay zakat on that as well. So any money that we've set aside, whether it's for Hajj, whether it's for tuition, whether it's for buying a house, whatever the purpose might be, we still have to pay zakat on that. How about money that you've loaned others? Yes, it's still your money, unless you think that maybe you're not going to get that money back. If you're going, you know what, this person's like, I really don't think they're going to return it, then you don't have to pay it. Go ahead. So, you want to take that?
Yeah, this is one opinion that I've heard as well, that when you have accounts receivable, and it's something that you expecting the return of it, but sometimes you have a loan, maybe like 30 years ago, you loan someone something, there's no hope of getting it back. It's the person has gone, and do you keep paying zakat on an amount? There's two ways of looking at that. Either you can pay all the back zakat when you get it back. So all this amount that you're owed, when it comes into your hands again, because you knew it was owed to you, and then you go into the back years and you do back payments of zakat. That's one way to solve that problem. But if these are loans that you are current loans, not loans that you've necessarily, or even forgiven. If you've forgiven the loan, you're not paying zakat on that, for example, on the receivable. No, no. So zakat cannot be, you cannot change the intention for something and make it into zakat. So for example, let's say I give someone a sum of money, and then a little while later I said, oh, I didn't pay my zakat this year. Okay, well, that amount that I gave them, it's in zakat. You can't change the intention like that. You cannot come, somebody says, you owe me a few $1,000s, and I say, okay, you know what? Don't worry about it because I'm intending my zakat to you. You can't do that. You'd have to actually take a sum of money and transfer it, or the transfer of ownership, what they call tamlik, has to take place. I have to make sure that I put it into your possession from my possession.
Okay, stocks, and we'll come back to stocks in a bit because how we calculate zakat on stocks is a bit more complicated, but do you have to pay zakat on stocks? The answer is yes. So stocks, retirement accounts, things like 401k, Roth 401k, IRA, Roth IRA, 529, if you have money in FSA, HSA, all of those types of accounts, you do have to pay zakat on. We'll just come back to figure out how we figure out the amount, inshallah. Pensions, you don't have to pay zakat on. So pension, because pension plan, you're getting income. You don't have like a balance that you're holding. So you're not holding on to that wealth. Versus a 401k is something that is an account. It's in your name. It has a clear balance. Both the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America as well as the Fiqh Council of North America, the two largest fiqh organizations in North America, have ruled that there is zakat on 401k. And so we'll come back on how to calculate it, but the reasons are that it's an account that you open, it's in your name, it has a balance, you manage the investments, you voluntarily contribute to it, and at the end of the day, you get all that money back. There's an argument about penalties that people make, and there's many ways to avoid the penalties. You can take a loan against your 401k, you can withdraw from your 401k if you need it for medical expenses, for buying a house. There's so many ways to get around that, and so that argument is not really held. Any assets that we're holding for gains. So whether it be real estate, and I'll come back to more details on real estate, but any art that we have. So if I buy art because I want to put it up on the wall in my house, okay, there's no zakat on it because it's part of my decorations. But if I buy a Van Gogh because I expect it will go up in value, it's an investment, then I will pay zakat on that. Same thing happens with collectibles like comic books or cards or whatever. Jewelry, if I'm doing it purely for investment purposes, yes, there's no difference of opinion. If it's investment, I will pay zakat on it. People ask a lot about cars nowadays. I don't know why I get a lot of questions on cars. So if you have classical cars, if you're using them for driving around and you enjoy having those cars, that's different. But if you're keeping them as investments, again, you're going to have to pay full zakat on that. Real estate, I'll come back to in a second because I want to talk about business assets first. Yeah, any jewelry, like the Sheikh said, if you have any jewelry, the jewelry that you're wearing, you will only be paying zakat on the gold and the silver part of it, not the rest of it. But whether you received it as a gift, whether you purchased it yourself, whether it was an inheritance, now that it's become in your ownership, the zakat has become due on you on it.
And just on that point, in some of our cultures, during marriage, it's unclear who owns the gold. But it's always good, not only for zakat purposes, but for inheritance purposes as well, that you clarify who is the owner of that gold. Because here's an example that ends up happening. Sometimes parents will give a on let's say on a marriage occasion or something like the child turns a certain age, they give some gold to the girl, some jewelry. Then the question comes, oh wait, do I have to pay zakat on that? Then she says, well, it's mine, but my parents are holding it. Like I don't have access to it. My parents hold it. So should they pay or should I pay? Right? This is another, sometimes people say, my in-laws gave it to me, but they're holding it. Okay? So it's not even in your possession. I've heard of this as well. Or they give it and they take it back.
It's like Quran.
Yeah, they give it and they take it back. Unfortunately, this is very wrong to do. But this is why it is actually good to clarify, if that has been given to you and it's in the possession of your parents, the owner, the person who it was given to, still has to pay it. They still have to pay it. Unless the parents, they said, oh, it's okay, we also included that, we paid on your behalf, and the person has the knowledge of that and they allowed that, that's okay. But this is something to remember. In many cultures, or sometimes our children become baligh. So when we said that the person has to be an Islamically legal adult, sometimes they think that means 18, 19, 20, when they leave the house and they get married. No, we're talking if a girl has 12 years old, she has her period, boy has wet dream, 12 years old, and the parents are saving up for the education, the college expenses, and they're putting it in an account that is owned by that child.
Like a UTMA, UGMA, a 529. There's many different types of accounts we open for our kids where we're holding money in the name of the kids, or we're holding it for them, even if we're holding it on our own account. Some people do this in the checking account. They'll say, you know what, I've put $10,000 aside. I'm gifting that to my child. They haven't given it to them because they think they're too young, but they're still set it aside for the child, and it belongs to the child at that point. So you have to be careful when they turn 12 years old or they reach bulugh, that they have to pay zakat on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is like salah, right? At 7 years old, we start, even younger than that, kids are running around, they want to pray with us, we encourage them as they become 7 years old. We really, really strongly encourage them as they reach the age of 10. We're making sure they're pretty much praying 5 times a day. And so zakat should be the same as we don't have to wait till they reach bulugh. We can start teaching them early. Same as salah, right? Like salah and zakat are mentioned in the Quran side by side 28 times together. These two really are like core pillars, essentials. Because, fasting comes once a year, but like these two are like core essentials. And so making sure that at a younger age, we teach the kids about zakah. It's like, there's a 2.5% that we pay. I've put some money aside for you. I will pay, you should know this. And then giving them some money and then having them pay some portion of that, right? Teaching them. Yeah. So if they haven't reached nisab, there's no zakat due. But that doesn't mean you can't teach them, right? You can't be like, hey, look, you have $100, give $2.50 away. Like we can start teaching them early just for practice. Just like we teach the half-day fasts. You fasted from suhoor time until like zuhr time, right? And we have them pray without wudu, even though they're not wearing proper clothes, all of this, right? It's just the practice to be teaching the kids all of the 5 pillars and not ignoring zakah. Like I think we do this well with fasting and with prayer, but we tend to ignore zakah.
And this is why it's also important to be clear on your finances. A lot of times parents don't tell the children that they actually own something because they want the kids to forget about it so that they use it later on. We don't want you to use it. And then at the very least, what you have to do is at least keep people aware, or the parent has to decide. Let's say I put something aside for my child. If I didn't put it in their name, I still have to pay on it. Even though I say, oh no, but this is for my child. But is it given into the ownership of the child? If it's not given in the ownership, it's on you to pay the zakat. Once it's transferred into their name, that's what they call tamlik. It means that you've given it to that person's possessions. So becoming clear on finances is very important because potentially you could be having, remember something that I wanted to go back to, that zakat is the haqq of the poor. So when we pay zakat, you can't call it a charity purely, and you can't even call it a tax. Okay? A tax is something you give up your money. We believe that amount of money is the haqq of the poor inside your money. So you're actually carrying a poor person's money inside your pocket in your bank account.
It's not our money to begin with.
It's not ours to begin with. Allah has said that amount is somebody else's already. So potentially we may be holding on to a lot of money that's somebody else's. And we are bringing this on our children as well. That's a very good question. And what should have happened was that should have been distributed in their inheritance, right? So anyone who passes away, all of their possessions are given away in inheritance. You can't say, you cannot say, oh, I have this very sentimental piece of gold from your husband, wife, child, and I will keep this for myself, and everything else gets, what's in the bank account will distribute. No, every single item of clothing, jewelry, that has to get distributed and divided into zakat. Now, into inheritance. Now, it's possible that someone forgot something, or they forgot to distribute it or liquidate it in inheritance. Then all that would happen is you don't pay zakat on that for a deceased person. The person has to be alive to pay their zakat. But once you get that, then either you have to break down the value of that and give it inheritance, or you have to ask the other inheritors, do I have permission to keep this item with me? And if they all agree, then you can do that. That's a side answer. Does that make sense? Let me know if you... Yeah. But that's an inheritance question. We can talk about that, yeah.
No, it's fine. Sure, if you want to take that, when it comes to inheritance, there's a lot of difference of opinion of, do you pay it post-distribution, pre-distribution, do you pay it right away, do you pay it later? And so at least the Hanafi opinion is that it's due after possession, not after the distribution, not before.
Yeah, because otherwise, potentially, unfortunately as well, in many of our cultures, the inheritance gets delayed, or the inheritance sometimes doesn't even reach the right people at all. So would we say that it has to come, the tamlik has to occur. If I don't own something, I don't possess it. I cannot be said, because otherwise, unfortunately, sometimes in our cultures, women don't get their inheritance, which is very wrong. And so does that mean that now they've been owing zakat for many, many years and somebody didn't give it to them? That's not right, right? On the other hand, you cannot launder illegal wealth by giving zakat on it. You still have to pay the zakat. It doesn't make it okay. So unfortunately, this happens. The brother took the sister's inheritance, did not give her her share of inheritance when the parents died, and now he says, oh, I'll use this money, I'm going to pay zakat on it, so it's as though it's my money. It doesn't clean the money for you. Actually, the entire wealth is haram for you, and it doesn't mean that just because you're giving zakat on it, or someone, for example, owns a liquor store. Unfortunately, Muslim owns a liquor store, and they say, oh, I'm going to pay zakat out of this money. So actually, the entire amount of money is dirty money, and you will not purify that wealth by giving 2.5, 10%, even 50%. You will not. Yeah. So I'm sorry,
the principle is there's no zakat on haram wealth. Why? Because the entire wealth is haram, so you have to give all of it away. So it's 100%. There's no 2.5%. It's 100%. You have to give that away because it came from haram. Nobody's paying zakat on it for that example, yes. For those, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's a good question, though, because sometimes like a piece of land can be held in limbo, and the parents have passed away, and the children just continue to live there, but nobody actually takes a possession of it. That's a fatwa question. I would, Dr. Saab, do you have any input into this question?
It should be distributed immediately, yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's been declared as something that needs to be liquidated and distributed, right? And so it may be that that particular year, it's not been liquidated yet, and you don't have the money to pay it. So at the time, maybe 2 years later, it gets liquidated, then you can pay for that year, and you can pay for the previous year as well. Yeah. Who pays the taxes?
Yeah, sometimes what happens is, the family, the parents' estate, they'll pay the bills of it, but they haven't broken it down because maybe sometimes they don't want to come to the question of how will we divide mom and dad's house? How will we do this? So it's a sentimental question, but actually it's divided in the ownership of each person. And so the question, what I have to research about is, do you pay, it's definitely safer to pay the back zakat, but it wasn't in your possession. So this is what we have to check, the nature. Because remember, every inheritor, they have a different situation. The person could inherit $1 million, but because they're in debt $2 billion, they're actually not paying zakat. And another person gets only a little bit of money, but because they are eligible to pay zakat. So you can't say across the board that everybody owes zakat.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance here, and like Dr. Muzammil said, the important thing is it should be distributed. Now, it's a different story if the distribution for legal reasons, maybe it has to go to probate, it has to go to court. This is why we should do proper estate planning, right? Like Sheikh Abdullah has been emphasizing again and again, know who owns that gold, know who owns that money. These problems come up in these three scenarios. Zakat, right? Who has to pay the zakat? Then it comes up during inheritance, same issue. This is a bigger issue. So people now get into, but my dad told me that that house was mine, but my siblings don't know. Well, that's just going to create problems. All of this needs to be written down in a proper estate plan with a will, with a living trust, all of the components that are required. And thirdly, in case of divorce, people don't want to talk about divorce. They don't want to think about divorce, so they don't properly document the wealth. People don't want to think about death. They don't properly document the wealth. But Allah will hold us accountable for that, right? We're living Muslims. We need to die Muslims. And so we need to make sure we've done our proper estate planning, inheritance planning, so that our inheritors aren't put through the headache of dealing with probate, and all this money is going into probate, right? Allah will hold us accountable for that. Why did you not write an estate plan? So these are things that we need to take seriously, right? Because this is wealth that is entrusted to us. Yeah. Yeah, maybe let's take the inheritance questions offline, because I think we have a few different things to get through in zakat. We'll come back to that, inshallah. Okay. Let's talk about business. And the reason we want to talk about business is, one, people have businesses, but I also want you to pay attention because businesses are then going to lead us to talk about stocks. And I want people to understand this concept well before we talk about stocks. Otherwise, stocks get very confusing. So let's start with a simple business. And let's say I have an ice cream shop, okay? So my ice cream shop might have a building, right? It might have ice cream making machines. I've never had an ice cream shop. I assume there's some machine that makes ice creams, right? Something. At least at home we have ice cream makers, so I assume a business has something like that. Then you have like ingredients like milk and sugar and sugar-free stuff, whatever, stevia. Then you have your cash register. You have a freezers where you keep the ice cream, because you don't just like dump all the ice cream that's left over. You freeze it and you keep it for the next day, right? So you have all of these different assets. Inventory, yes, that's called inventory. So I have all these different things that are part of the business. Now, from an accounting perspective, fixed assets are those things that generate me income over time. Okay, you don't have to know this, but I'll explain it. Those things are not zakatable. So what does that mean? The building that I have that runs my shop is like the house that I live in, right? I need it every day. I need it, like I use it. I can't be like paying zakat on that, because what do? Take a brick out of the building every day, every year, take a few bricks out and pay zakat on it? It doesn't make any sense. The same applies to the ice cream making machine. It's a machine that I use. It's kind of like my car, right? Or anything else that I have at home, or my furniture. So I don't pay zakat on that. No zakat at all. I don't pay zakat on the cash register itself, right? So the cash register is a machine that I use. I don't pay zakat on the freezers. So none of that is zakatable. Those are all called fixed assets, because those are the things that I use for income generation. However, there's cash in the cash register, right? And there's cash in the bank account. I will pay zakat on that because that's cash. The other thing I'll pay zakat on is, in accounting terms, we call it accounts receivable. Accounts receivable are those, it's basically money that people owe me. Maybe I sold, tubs of ice cream to this, Costco or something, and Costco now owes me money from that. So that becomes accounts receivable because it's as good as cash, right? It will get converted into cash. So it's like cash. So I pay on the cash that I have, and I pay on accounts receivable, which will become cash in the future, inshallah, right? The third thing that I pay zakat on is inventory. Inventory in this case is the ice cream that's sitting in the freezer. Why do I pay zakat on that? Because that's also going to become cash, right? Tomorrow I'll sell some, and the day after tomorrow I'll sell some more. So these things are all basically like cash or cash-like. So it's cash, it's accounts receivable, and it's inventory. Those are the three things I will pay zakat on. So if I have a business, I must have books, I must have accounting going on, right? I will go and I will look up the value of my cash and cash equivalents. I will look up accounts receivable. I can subtract allowance for bad debt because those are loans that I'm not going to get back. And I'm going to take inventory and I will pay zakat on that. Any questions on that from a business perspective before we get into stocks? Oh, good question. Mhm. Yes, yeah, good question. So first of all, business, this is how it works. You look at it from an accounting perspective: cash, accounts receivable, inventory. Now let's come back to real estate. Real estate can be of different types. If I'm living in that house, or maybe it's my summer home, so I still use it. I go there in the summers or winters or something like that. That's for my personal use. I have no investment intention. I don't pay zakat on that, okay? Secondly, I could have a house that I use for rental income. Well, that's a business, right? And the house in this scenario is like the building for my ice cream shop. And so the house itself is being used to generate income. It's fixed asset. I don't pay zakat on the house, okay? But what happens is rental income comes from the house. So I have my rent coming in every month, but I also have some property taxes going out. I have some bills going out, maybe insurance, things like that. But that money keeps coming into my bank account. And so when zakat due date comes, that rent will be inside my bank account, and I will just pay zakat on that, right? So I don't pay zakat on 2.5% of the house. I just pay zakat on my bank account, which happens to have the rental income in it. Then you're not going to end up paying any zakat on that at the end of the day. Yeah, if the rental income is equal to your expenses.
But what do you mean? Sorry, I just want to clarify. Do you mean if on the books it's equal?
Physically, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What matters is what lands inside your account. And what lands in your account, that's what you pay on.
Yeah, so we're not going to look at like depreciation or amortization or anything like that. Like, we don't care about that. We're at the end of the day, if you have a rental house, the way to think about it is the money's coming into the bank account. It's coming in and out of the bank account. You're going to be paying zakat on that bank account, and that covers you, inshallah. Yeah, the question is, what happens if people aren't paying up your accounts receivable? So there's multiple reasons why in the accounting books, under accounts receivable, there's another account called allowance for bad debt. It's something, allowance for bad debt. And what you're able to do is estimate, even for tax reasons you should do this, but also for zakat reasons, is that you know your business. And you know in your particular business, you know what, only 97% of my customers pay, or only 80% of my customers pay, whatever it might be. And you know that as an ongoing pattern, right? And so what you do is you take the accounts receivable, you can subtract the allowance for bad debt, and then you can pay zakat on the remaining, because it's not money that you're going to get back. Yeah, the guy's saying he'll pay you. You have to decide. I mean, both for zakat and accounting purposes and tax purposes, you have to decide, like, is he actually going to pay you or is he not going to pay you? You can write it off. You can write it off and say, I'm never going to get it back, or you can keep it on the books.
Then if it comes into your possession, unless you forgave the amount, then you have to pay back zakat. So just because you wrote it off, right? He's still, yeah. Yeah, then you would pay back zakat because he did make true on his
Yeah,
debt to you.
so Sheikh and I, like, we differ on this. He's saying that what you do is you get the money back, so you backdate for the last 30 years, you pay zakat on that. And my view is that you thought it was gone. You wrote it off. You had no expectation you were going to get it back. And so now when the money comes back, it's just new money for you at that point. And so you only pay zakat from that point forward. Because those 30 years, you didn't have a chance to hold on to the money. You didn't get to invest the money. You thought it was gone. You know, you couldn't do anything with it. So that's my view. So there's some difference on that. So you have a home that you purchased for yourself, but for some reason you're not able to live there and you're staying in a rental home. So as long as the intention continues to be that, you know, that is your home and you plan to be there someday and it's not for investment, then no, you don't pay zakat on it. If you change your intention that, hey, it's now become investment, then you have to pay zakat on it. And just to kind of finish the thought on real estate before we move on to the next question is, there's a third type of real estate. So we talked about estate that you have for real estate. There's actually many types, but there's real estate that you have for your own living. Then there's real estate you have for rental. The third is if you have real estate that you have because you flip properties. So you buy a house and you sell the house. You buy a house, you develop it, you improve it, you refurbish it, and then you sell the house, right? And so what happens in that scenario is you are trading in houses. And when it's trading in houses, those houses are actually inventory. In fact, even in your accounting books, it's going to show up as inventory. So because it's become inventory, it's an asset for trade, you're going to pay full 2.5% zakat on it. So it's actually very high zakat. But any item for inventory is going to become like that, where you pay full 2.5% zakat on it.
What this means as well is that even if you have 10 houses and you don't live in any one of them, let's say, you have 20 cars. People say, I have more cars than I need. It's beyond my personal use. It's still not going to be zakatable unless you bought it with the intention of resale. There's another thing that's important to know, that they say that at the time of purchase, what was your intention? If it was to resell this item, then it is an item for sale. But for example, you live in your personal home, now you put it up for sale. Does it become an inventory item? No, because that's not why you bought the home. So many people get confused. Like, I'm selling my house, my zakat year has come up. Do I also pay 2.5% because I've listed my house? Say no, because that was not purchased with the intention of resale. Now, is there a loophole in this? There is, because it's very high to pay zakat on an entire value of a home. Of course, you only pay, usually people do it in payments, so they only actually possess a very small portion of it in the beginning. But if you were to buy a home and then change your intention to sell it, you know, you bought it for yourself, then you change the intention, then you would not have to pay zakat on that as an inventory item. So if you flipped houses, but you just said to yourself every time, you know what, I'm going to live in it for a little while, then I'm going to flip it. So I know people who do this. They buy a house, they move into it for a little while, then they just leave it, and then they sell it. Do they have to pay zakat on that? Actually, technically, no, because it was a personal use home. So this is how they get around.
Zakat evasion is very, very expensive.
Yeah, but don't.
Because Allah knows your intention.
Exactly. Allah knows it better than the IRS.
Yeah, yeah. So these things are called, in fiqh, we call them hila. Hila meaning it's a trick, right? The problem with tricks is tricks might be fine at a contract level. So, you know, it's perfectly reasonable that maybe I bought a house for myself, and then I decided I don't want to live in it, and so I'm going to sell it, right? That's not a problem. But when I make the intention, oh, Allah's, you know, I found this loophole in zakat, and I'm going to use this to buy and sell houses this way, Allah knows your intention, and that's a very big problem. We're messing with the pillar of faith.
So people who before the year is over, they transfer all their wealth to their child or something like this, verbally, okay, I give you all my money, okay? Say okay.
Yeah.
Now I give it. The problem is you do that, you can't take it back from them. That's a problem, because they're children. So there's always loopholes in how to do this, but we don't follow the legal tricks and the loopholes. Like, we go sit with our accountant. Yeah. It's perfectly fine to legally try to reduce your taxes.
Legally try to reduce your taxes.
You don't sit with the scholar and ask them how to legally reduce your zakat, because it's an ibadah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
If the diamonds are there for business purposes, for investment purposes, you will pay zakat on it every year. Yes. If it's getting devalued, you'll be paying lesser zakat. Yes. But you still have to pay zakat on it. Every year you have to calculate the value. Don't make it too burdensome upon yourself. Don't think that like I have to take all of my diamonds to the, just, go take one time, figure out the value. And then the next year, just look at the values of diamonds. Are they generally going up or down? And you can estimate based on that. The zakat is really not supposed to be such a burden, right? And so we don't want to make it too hard upon ourselves. And that's why when we get to stocks, I really want to show you the super easy way to calculate zakat on stocks. I'll show you that to you very practically, because people get scared and then they just don't end up paying zakat. And we don't want to do that. So zakat should be easy enough, inshallah.
No, I agree with Sheikh, because a lot of people get this kind of waswasa, OCD, when it comes to their zakat. And they think that, the way that they used to do it in the olden days is the zakat collector would go to house and say, how many sheep do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, all right, we'll take one here.
Yeah.
And how many? Oh, you have 40. Okay, yeah, we'll take one. How many camels do you have? We'll just take one. And the Prophet ﷺ said to them, do not take the best of people's wealth. So don't take the nicest camel they have. Don't take the nicest sheep because they're attached to it. Take a middle one, not the one low value. So everything was approximate. Nowadays, even the idea of 2.5%, that's not how they looked at it. So every 40 coins, just give one. So it's going to be approximate. But at the same time, what do? You always tip the scales a little bit in favor of giving a little bit more zakat. And then that way, even if you have, maybe you had some cash that you left inside your pocket or something like that, you give a little bit extra, and that takes care of the little bit.
Yeah, this is the problem like nowadays, because zakat has become a spreadsheet at the end of the day. I mean, my zakat is a spreadsheet, right? I'm sure most of us are like that. We have some Excel or Google Doc or something. And so it becomes so mechanical. And most of this session today, as every zakat seminar, is going to be about how to calculate zakat. What do you pay it on? What are the numbers? Is it 2.5%? Is it zakatable assets, net asset value? All this stuff becomes so technical that we get too far detached from the spirit. It's a pillar of Islam. It's an act of ibadah. When you're making your spreadsheet, did you start with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim? Did you think about this as an act of ibadah? Allah, I'm doing this because you commanded me to do so. I want my intention to be purely for you. Please, Allah, make the numbers in my spreadsheet add up correctly. Let's treat it like we treat salah, right? Let's have some khushu', let's have some focus. Start with Bismillah. Think about how it's an act of ibadah. We're just so disconnected from like hand-to-hand giving somebody zakat. Same thing happens with qurbani, right? Like we don't get to like raise an animal and slaughter it anymore. We just send like $100 over to Islamic Relief and it's done. So we're too disconnected from real life. And so we have to do some artificial, when we go to the gym, right? Thousands of years ago, there was no gym. People would just live their lives. That was gym. So we need to figure out how to bring some of that back. Like we go to the gym artificially to make up for that. So we need to do some things to make zakat more real. We should give at least some of our zakat hand to hand, personally, right? Feel it. And when you're doing the spreadsheet, make it an act of ibadah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. The question is, it's not settling well with the brother, and it doesn't settle well with me either, that somebody has 20 houses and they don't have to pay zakat just because they're not leaving the money in the bank account, right? It boils down to the intention. Allah says He's created all of us with different darajat, like different levels. Why? So that He can test us. Allah says He's created us all the different, I ask my kids this question all the time. Is life fair? What do you guys think? Is life fair? Who thinks life is fair? Nobody thinks life is fair, right? Why? Because Allah gave us, He gave some of us health, others not the same amount. Some of us wealth, others not the same, right? Some of us have more intelligence than others do. And so He gave us all different amounts because our tests are different. But the akhirah is what makes it fair, right? The akhirah makes it perfect because each one of us will get exactly what we deserve. But in this dunya, we have different amounts. So each one of us has a different amount of wealth, different status, and we will each be tested differently. But Allah does make it clear in the Quran. إِنَّ الْمُبَذِّرِينَ كَانُوا إِخْوَانَ الشَّيَاطِينَ. People who are wastefully spending money are the brothers of shaitan. That's a very strong statement, right? It's like we're chilling with shaitan. We're hanging out and becoming friends with not even friends. We're the brothers of shaitan. So yeah, there's no zakat on it, no doubt. But it doesn't mean that there's not a different sin that we might be engaging in. Because maybe we're intentionally trying to avoid zakat, which is going to be a major, major, major sin. Or maybe we're just being wasteful, right? Because when you have that amount of wealth, for every, or any amount of wealth that we have, Allah's going to hold us accountable for every single penny that we have on the Day of Judgment. We will be questioned, how did you earn this? How did you spend this? How did you earn this? How did you spend this? And by the way, the more money you have, the more you will have to sit there and go through line by line, right? It's not that being rich is haram in Islam, not at all, right? Because we have examples of Sahaba like Abdullah bin Auf, who somebody on the internet did the math and they said his net worth, you know Elon Musk, how much is Elon Musk worth? 400 billion, yeah? $400 billion. They did the math on Abdullah bin Auf and they said if you look at the amount of wealth that he had at his time, inflation adjusted, it's 800 billion. Right? So, and guess what? He was one of the 10 guaranteed paradise. So you can have a lot of money and still be guaranteed paradise. That's not the issue. The issue is, did you earn it halal? Did you spend it halal? Did you give your zakat? Did you give your sadaqah? Were you attached to that wealth? Were you attached to the dunya? Or were you distracted by it? Were you doing your obligations? There's a lot of other factors that come into play, right? So we're not going to sit here and say someone with 20 houses, you know, they're like this or they're like that. We don't know. We don't know. Every person's situation is different. But we have to worry about our own accountability. Because on the Day of Judgment, we're all going to be running from each other going like, nafsi, nafsi, right? Myself, myself, myself. So we have to worry about ourselves. So yes, we have to see, am I just buying houses randomly? Or do I actually have a need for these? Do I have a bigger purpose? Am I taking the rental income from these houses and am I, doing something beneficial with that? Yeah. So yeah, the brothers heard an opinion that on rental property, you don't pay zakat on the house, but you pay 10% on the rental income. So where some people derive this from was, and that's actually my next bullet point here. Yeah, because what I was going to say is, if there's farmers here, like we need to have a whole separate session because zakat on crops and cattle is like very complicated. And so we're not going to cover that today. So I was going to say, as long as you don't have like cattle and crops and hidden treasures is also complicated. So if we don't have to deal with that, that just make our lives easier. But when it comes to zakat on rental property, so what some scholars have done is they've analogized that and they said a rental property is sort of like agricultural crops, okay? And they say crops, on crops, what you do is you don't pay zakat. What you pay zakat on is called ushr, meaning 1/10. So you pay 1/10 of the harvested crops that you get, okay? Because what they say is that a rental property is like growing crops, okay? So my response to that, and the vast majority opinion basically doesn't agree with that opinion of 10%. Because my response to that is, for those things where we already have something in the Sharia, an answer, we can't be going to analogies. Analogy, or this concept of qiyas in our Sharia, where we can say, hey, look, drugs are like alcohol, right? Drugs intoxicate like alcohol. That makes sense because we don't have a hukum in the Quran or Sunnah on drugs. We have a hukum on alcohol. So we say, well, drugs are like alcohol because they intoxicate, and we can come up with a new ruling. This is how we come up with new rulings on new issues. Stem cells or cryptocurrency or whatever it might be, is we analogize it to something that already exists in the Sharia. But when an answer already exists in the Sharia, then we don't do that. Okay, so rental property, something we already understand. And so we don't need something new. Same thing, some people have said you pay 10% of the profits on stocks. It doesn't make any sense because stocks are something we already understand as businesses. So we don't do that. Okay.
I wanted to add something. You know how you were saying you were feeling uneasy about it? Yeah, that's actually, it's good and it could be good and bad. The good thing is it's a sign that you have a living heart. And so you should say, alhamdulillah, that you do feel like your conscience is bothering you about it. But there's other things that you can do, because sometimes it's not a feeling of a legal question. This what's bothering you is not a zakat question, actually. What's bothering you is the idea of, why am I not doing more with what Allah has blessed me with? So sometimes the solution will not come in trying to find a way to pay the zakat, but in trying to do good with Allah, what Allah has blessed you with. So if you have a home, trying to find, if there's a family that's needy and saying, okay, why don't you come and live in my house because it's empty, why don't you rent it? I'll give you a subsidized rent. Finding, let's say, a widow or some orphans or something and having them sit on that property. Taking family members who may need help and settling them there. So all these things, what it does is it makes the possessions that you have towards some good use. You're applying it for Allah. Or saying, for example, okay, I'll rent out this house, and the rental of this house is going to go straight to the masjid to run their operating expenses, or straight to a madrasa, for example. That way you hold on to your possession, but who's benefiting from it? Someone else, right? You have a sadaqah jariyah. And this is how you balance this feeling of that little bit of guilt to have.
At the same time, there's one other point I'll make on that, which is it's okay to look at zakat when you're looking at your portfolio and your investments. It's okay to consider the zakat. Just like we look at, if I invest in this thing, it's a 10% return, but I'll have to pay 3% tax. It's okay to consider zakat, because we have direct evidence for this. There's a hadith in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, which the scholars debate, did it come, Imam al-Tirmidhi mentions this himself, did it come from the Prophet ﷺ or Umar radiallahu anh? We don't know which it is, but it came from one of them. And it doesn't really matter whether it came from the Prophet ﷺ or Umar radiallahu anh, right? Because Umar radiallahu anh, of course, is going to follow the sunnah. Now, if I made a statement like this, people would get very upset. But I'll quote Umar radiallahu anh, or maybe it's the Prophet ﷺ, where he was talking about the wealth of an orphan. And what did he say? He said, فَلْيَتَّجِرْ فِيهِ. Take this money and trade with it, like invest with it. But he explained why. Why should you be doing investing with this money? He said, وَلَا يَتْرُكُ. Don't let it be. Don't just let it sit there. حَتَّى تَأْكُلَهُ الصَّدَقَةِ. Because what's going to happen is, and sadaqah in this context means zakah. He's saying if you just let the money sit there, what's going to happen? Zakat is going to eat it, 2.5% gone. So $100 this year becomes 97.5 next year. That doesn't even take into account inflation, right? And then the year after it becomes less than 95. The year after it becomes 92.5. That's why zakat is a motivator for us to not just let money sit there. It's to invest it. And by the way, when you're renting a house, you're not the only one benefiting. The people inside the house are benefiting. When you invest in a business, you're creating jobs. You're creating beneficial products and services. We should be making that intention, by the way, when we're doing our business, right? Let's take those points. One of the issues with, Shaykh Abdul Hassan al-Nadwi used to say, the problem with Muslims is not that they have bad intentions. The problem with Muslims is we have no intentions. We all hear the hadith of إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. We all know, hey, make intention, have good intentions. But when we go to sleep, do we make intention? Allah, I am sleeping for your sake so I can wake up and be a better worshiper, so I can fast better, so I can take care of my wife better, so I can take care of my children better, so I can be a good employee and earn halal, so I can be, let's make all those intentions. 6 hours of sleep, 8 hours of sleep, you get reward the entire time. You go to the gym, Allah, I want to be healthy for your sake, right? So if we're going to do a business, Allah, I am creating jobs through this business. I'm providing valuable services. Even if I'm selling ice cream, I'm giving people pleasure in eating. Alhamdulillah, it's okay. It's a good business. Nothing wrong with that, right? So we need to add that intention element, and it's okay if we're motivated to invest money and spend money, and we take zakat into consideration, because it's going to prevent us from letting money just sit around. So it's a positive thing. Yes, let's get back to stocks. Okay, so let's get back to stocks, but let me come back to stocks. Actually, let me finish this topic. I'll come back to topics. Okay, so what is zakatable? Okay, what can we subtract? Because what we're going to do is we're going to take everything that's zakatable, we're going to add it up, then we're going to subtract some things. What are the things that we can subtract? Liabilities that have become due. Sheikh, I don't know if you might differ on this one, because I know the NZF slide said 12 months. I take the opinion that we can subtract 1 month of things that have become due. So if you have rent that's become due and you'll have to pay it in a month, utility bills, credit card bills, taxes, mortgage payments, the student loans that's coming up, anything like that that's coming up in the next month, you can subtract that from the total, because it's something you need. That's money you need immediately because it's something due. It's already become a debt. So it's something that you owe, and then you go ahead and keep that for 2 weeks from now, I'll have to pay my credit card bill, so I'll hang on to that money. I don't have to pay zakat on that. So what you do, and we'll come back to stocks, is basically you add up all of your assets, okay? You subtract those things that are not zakatable, right? Like your house and your car and whatever. Or you could just not add them in the first place. That would be an easy way to do it. You subtract the deductions, the things that have become due. You check to see, is this equal to $8,000, right? Is it 8,000 or more? Then what you do is if it's more than $8,000, then you will pay 2.5% of that whole amount. We'll come back to stocks, just to be clear. Including the 8,000. It does, yeah. So last year it was 7,000 something. The year before it was like 6,000 something. The gold value has been increasing dramatically over the last couple of years. And so this value changes with the value of gold. And so on the day that your zakat is due, right, which a lot of people have timed it to Ramadan, but it could be Muharram, could be Rajab, could be any month. Whenever your zakat is due, you go to goldprice.org and you put in 85 grams of gold, and then you look at what the value is, and that's the nisab. Even if what? If the gold price decreases, it will decrease. Yeah. Yeah, for that specific year. Yeah. So you will do the math, but again, you're going to pay zakat on all of the different assets that you have, right? Not just 8,000, and not just the savings, not just the income, but everything that you have. And I'll come back to stocks now, if that's okay. Yeah, that's probably a good thing to do. Let's go through this. Okay, so I'll take you through 5 examples, and these are relatively easy to understand. So we said nisab is equal to about 8,000, right? So this is a person who last year they had $1,500, and this year they have $7,500. So this one's a gimme. Do they have to pay zakat this year or no? No, right? Okay. How about this person? They just reached nisab just recently, a month or 2 ago. Do they have to pay zakat? They have to pay zakat? Everybody agrees? No disagreement. Okay. Well, last year was here, and right now we're here. So are they paying zakat right now, or are they not paying zakat? So that's not the answer to my question, though. No. Okay. So if we look right here, they only reached this value of $8,000 just like 2 months ago, right? I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, at least one of these is 2 months. So they only did it 2 months ago. Okay? So they're going to wait till next year, a year from this time, where they crossed nisab and then pay zakah. Is that clear?
What Sheikh is saying is that the day that you crossed the nisab, the day that you went above, let's say, that $8,000, is what we call the zakat due date, or your zakat anniversary.
Yeah.
And sometimes anniversary is the easier way to remember it. And that zakat anniversary, if you want to get really technical, you can look at the Islamic calendar. You can get it on your Google Calendar. And then that is your zakat anniversary going forward. Next year, you wait till that year comes again. So I think that's the next slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Yeah, it's fine. You can explain.
So basically what happens is let's say, for example, you crossed on the 1st of Muharram, you crossed the $8,000. On the next year, 1st of Muharram, then you look again at your wealth, and if it's still over the nisab, then you pay 2.5%.
Yeah, I'll get to that. Okay, I'll talk about that. Yeah. Let's do that. So let's talk about this person. They reached nisab on the 1st of Ramadan last year. Now we're at 1st of Ramadan this year. And you can see that the amount of money that they had in their bank account was always above nisab. Are they going to pay zakah? We're going to pay yes. Any other reviews? So everybody agrees we're going to pay zakat, right? Because nisab was reached, the amount of money was always above nisab, and you're still at nisab. Okay. How about this situation? This person, let's say they've been above nisab for years. Okay, they've been above nisab, everything's good, life's been happy, and then somehow last year, they lost all their money, all the way down to zero. And then they came back up and they've reached nisab again. Or is this person going to pay zakat? Are they going to pay zakat this year? No. On intention? No, it doesn't mean on intention. Over here, right? Yeah. So you're going to pay 1 year from this date. Everybody, all the scholars agree on that, okay? It's going to be 1 year from this date because you have a reset. You went to zero, you had a reset, you reached nisab, you're going to do that. Now this one's the tricky one though. Okay, so you were at nisab, you've been at nisab for years, whatever, and then in the middle of the year you dropped below nisab. Then you came back up, then dropped. Even if you dropped once, and you're still, so at the beginning you were at nisab, at the end you were at nisab, but somehow in the middle you drop below the line. Do you pay zakah? One no. Any yeses? Where do you end? You're ending at nisab, so you're like well above. You're like $8,500. I thought everyone was Hanafi here. They're very selective. You guys are very selective. So when the children have to pay zakat, we're all Hanafi.
They are Hanafi, they just don't know it.
Okay. So this one, there's actually a difference of opinion. The Hanafis say you will pay zakat. Okay? Because they say, look, if you reach nisab at the beginning and you have nisab at the end and you didn't go to zero in the middle, you will pay zakah. Okay? The Shafis, Malikis, Hanbalis, they differ. But the Hanafis say that you'll pay zakat. The other three say you don't. But anyway, most of us hopefully are not like going up and down from 8,000. So, and if we are, this is the safer opinion anyway. So let's just pay zakat if we're at nisab, we've been there for a year, and even if like it dropped below in the bank balance, it's okay. I would suggest just pay the zakat. Okay. Now the important thing to realize is what we're paying zakat on is not just the amount of money we've had for a year. It's just all the money that we have in our bank accounts and everything added up. Okay. So it doesn't matter. Some people are like, oh, I won't pay zakat on this because I just got this 2 months ago and a year hasn't passed. It doesn't matter. We just add up all of our balances. And that's what we pay zakat on. So I want to come back to zakat on stocks, but yeah. Okay. What if we pay zakat in advance? Oh, we'll come back to that question. Is this related? No, you would pay zakat on 8,500. Yep.
I mean, not on the excess after the 8,000. It's on the entire wealth that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important to mention. That it's not that you pay after 8,000, then you pay on whatever. It's once you're above the 8,000, you pay on the entire 8,000 and whatever else is there.
Yeah, that's why if you want to take a screenshot or a picture of this one, like the idea behind nisab is just to know, do you pay zakat or not? But if you're greater than nisab, you pay zakat on the entire zakatable amount. Not you don't subtract nisab or anything like that. Okay.
It's just an eligibility marker.
Eligibility check. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about stocks. Now, we've already talked about two things that are very important. One is we said things that we hold as assets of trade. Rolex watches. If I wear the Rolex watch, I don't pay zakat because I bought it for wearing purposes. If I bought it because of resale value, then I pay zakat. If I bought it because I like wearing it and it has resale value, the 50% rule applies. So what's my intention? Is my intention more dominant that I bought it for investment, or is my intention more dominant that I bought it for wearing purposes? It boils down to intention. Same thing applies to like my cars, classic cars that I have, or the art that I bought that's on the wall. Maybe I bought it for investment, but I put it on the wall. Or maybe I put it on the wall, but it's for investment. So I go with the dominant intention, okay? So things that are held for investment purposes, we're going to pay full 2.5% of the value. Businesses, we said, work differently. Businesses, we said, we look at cash, accounts receivable, and inventory only. So how do we look at stocks? That's the question. And what the scholars have done is they've divided stocks into, why did you buy the stocks? Just like the real estate house, like the rental house versus the flip, right? Here we decide, why did I buy the stocks? If I think of stocks like an asset for trade, that's why they're called day traders, by the way, because they're trading. stocks because they buy stocks and they sell it next week or they sell it tomorrow. They see momentum, they're swing trading, they're momentum trading. They're looking at, immediate fluctuations in the stock price. Maybe they're doing technical analysis. That type of thing, you pay 2.5% of the market value of the stocks. So very easy to do. I have $100,000 in shares. I pay 2.5%. It's going to be $2,500 in zakat. There's another type of investor. And this type of investor, it's not called a trader, they're called an investor because they hold the shares for a long term. And they care about the profitability of the business. So maybe they look at ROA and ROE and EBITDA and PE and PEG. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just say, you know what, I think Apple shares are going to be very successful. I think it's a really good business. I think they're going to make a lot of money. I'd like to hold this business for the long term. I'd like to buy some shares. And so they go and they buy the stocks from that perspective. They're treating their shares as a business. So because they're treating their shares as a business, we come back to this one and we say we're going to pay on the cash, the accounts receivable, and the inventory of Apple as a business. So then people go like, oh my God, that's really hard. How do I figure out how to pay stocks on Apple? And so this is where like life can be really easy because, let me just show you this website. It's called zakat.zoya.finance. Okay, zakat.zoya.finance. And the reason, look, they don't charge any money. I don't make any money off of this. I don't care. The reason I want to show this to you is because if you're holding shares for the long run, it can make a big difference in zakat. So if I go here and I say I own, I'll talk about the 401k as well, inshallah. APPL, for example. Apple is what I just talked about, right? Or is it AAPL? AAPL, right? Let's pick a different company. My internet's not great over here. It's a terrible demo with bad internet. Okay, Apple shares 100. This is where I choose. Am I a day trader? Because I'm holding the shares for less than 365 days and I'm more of a trader, then I choose short term. But if I'm buying for the long term, 365 days or more, I choose that, and then I just click on calculate, and it tells me that my zakat due right here is $23, okay? So my shares are worth $23,000, right? So if I had to pay, if I was a day trader, I'd be paying $600 in zakat. But because I'm not a day trader, I'm an investor, I pay $23 in zakat. It's a big difference. It's a big, big difference because if I'm a day trader, I'm paying 2.5% of $23,000. If I'm an investor, I am paying 2.5% on just the cash, the accounts receivable, and inventory, which is a much smaller amount. And so your zakat obligation ends up being, on average, like less than a third of what it would have been, on average, if you look at the S&P 500. So that's the way to think about stocks. So the question becomes, how do we deal with 401k? And there's two ways to look at 401k, and I want to make sure I explain both of them. I can think of my 401k as a short-term investment. Most people don't look at it that way. In fact, it doesn't make a lot of sense to look at it that way, but you can look at it as a short-term investment. So I can say, okay, my 401k has $100,000 in it. If I was to liquidate this, if I converted this into cash, then I would have to pay some taxes and penalties. So $100,000, let's say my taxes and penalties are like 50%, just making up a number. Probably not too far from the truth. $100,000, if I convert that into cash, it becomes $50,000 because I have to pay taxes and penalties. Then I take the $50,000 and I pay 2.5% of that. Okay? So that's one way to evaluate the 401k. Everyone follow that one? 100,000 pulled out with taxes became 50. I pay 2.5% because I'm looking at it from a short-term perspective. The other way to look at a 401k is look at it just like I explained right now from a long-term perspective. I have no intention to, maybe in case of emergency I might liquidate, but I have no intention to liquidate my 401k. I'll keep it for long-term investments. I'll pull it out at the age of 60, 62, 65, something like that. So now you're thinking about the stocks in your 401k as long-term investments. So then you take the $100,000, you go to zakat.zoya.finance, and you say, actually, so much of it is in VOO, so much is it in VTI, so much of it is in these, then you plug all of that in, and you're going to end up with a zakat amount that is actually dramatically lower. If you're looking at it this way, you don't subtract taxes and penalties because there are no taxes and penalties, right? So all you do is you just plug in the amounts in your 401k into the tool, and it'll tell you how much zakat you have. So just to give you an idea, if you own, for example, the entire S&P 500, right, the stock market, your zakat is going to be approximately like 2.5% of 30% of the entire stock market. If you buy halal stocks, like a lot of halal stuff, something like HLAL or SPUS, for example, because the entire S&P 500 is not halal, but SPUS is all of the S&P 500 minus the haram stuff, right? So if you have something like SPUS, on average, you're going to be paying zakat less than the cash, accounts receivable, and inventory are less than about 12%. So you end up paying zakat on 2.5% of 12%. Your zakat is going to be like 0.03%, something like that. It's a very, very, very small amount of zakat that you end up paying. So my recommendation is think of your 401k as a long-term investment. Look at all the holdings in there, plug it into this tool. Whatever it says your zakat due is, that's what you pay zakat on. Your 401k ultimately is either going to be holding shares or some ETFs or some mutual funds. And so you take all of those symbols and you plug them into this tool, and then it'll give you your zakat amount. Same for IRA and Roth IRA. Yeah. 529 is going to be the same. Yeah. Any ESA is going to be the same. Okay. Okay. I think we want to cover a couple of last topics. One of them, which is very important, is the distribution of zakat and who do you give zakat to?
So the question of the categories of zakat, we often think these.
Yeah.
Sure. No, any excess that you pay is sadaqah. Yeah. It doesn't you can't say, because that wasn't your intention, right? So you paid in advance, even for the following year. Do you follow any different opinion than that?
So to be clear, it depends on how you, I'm going to explain it, maybe you can see if it's different. So zakat has a due date, or I like what Sheikh said, it's an anniversary date, right? So it makes it sound much nicer. So there's an anniversary date, and it doesn't mean you have to pay zakat like exactly on that date. And in fact, if you're going to try to do that, you might even struggle to pay exactly on that date. And so zakat can be paid in advance, in the sense that there's some difference, but most scholars allow you to pay your zakat up to a year in advance. And so you know that next year you're going to have zakat, you can start paying the zakat now. Right? Nowadays, we tend to align with Ramadan expecting extra blessings. But imagine if the Sahaba were paying only in Ramadan. The whole system would have fallen apart. At that time, we're going to talk about this in this verse, there's this idea of عَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا, zakat collectors. All year long would go around and do exactly what Sheikh said. They would say, oh, 40 sheep. Okay, I'm going to take one of these. You know? And so they did this job all year long. And so zakat was something that was paid all year long. I say we've become like Ramadan Muslims now, right? We like to fast in Ramadan. Okay, that makes sense. We come up to the masjid to pray in Ramadan. Right? We want to give zakat in Ramadan. If we could, we would do Hajj in Ramadan. Like we would totally do that. But instead, we do Umrah in Ramadan. Right? So zakat is something that was all year, and these workers would do that all year long. And so giving zakat in advance is something that's established. You can give it in advance, okay? But you don't want to go too far. You can't be like, I'm giving the next 5 years zakat in advance. That becomes crazy. So up to 1 year, it would not be a problem.
No, this is, I haven't heard this opinion, that if like 1 year you have 500 and by accidentally you paid 600, that you're like, oh, well, the 100 I'll count it for next year, yeah.
You're paying in advance, but I said you're paying up to 1 year in advance, right? Yeah. So that was the key point that I made with that. That if I'm paying in it,
yeah.
You overpaid it, that's okay. Alhamdulillah. That overpayment becomes, inshallah, an act of charity. You get a lot of reward for that.
We have to remember as well, just a quick second, that remember, there is no such thing as overpaying zakat in a real sense, because remember, it's charity. It's ibadah. It's like saying I was only supposed to pay 2 sunnah after, and I paid 4 sunnah, I overpaid it. You see what I'm saying? So if we inherently see zakat as like a tax, then there's an overpayment. And we want it to apply to another time. But if we see it as it's all worship, it lands in the hands of Allah before it lands in the hands of the poor person. We're giving back the wealth to Allah. Allah will appreciate it much more than we will, regret it. So it's important to change the perspective of it too.
I like that. Over pray. Okay, that's a new one for me.
But I understand what you mean, because you may wildly overshoot. But this is why as well, if you want to prevent the feeling that you overpaid, don't pay in advance. You see what I'm saying? Don't put yourself in a position, and that way you will do that every time. Yeah. But one of the things I wanted to, before we get to your question, one of the things I wanted to address before we get to the categories of zakat, the recipients. We often, when we become like Ramadan Muslims, we make this one mistake. Some people say I'm going to delay my zakat and pay in Ramadan in order for me to get more blessings. Now let me ask you, is it more virtuous to wait till Ramadan to pay your blessings? Because, deeds are being multiplied.
Yeah.
Which one is it? Is it better to do that or not? Yes, this is the whole point. See, we have become so spiritually selfish. Even in spirituality, we're selfish. And we have said that, you know what? My zakat due date, let's say, is in Muharram, but I want it in Ramadan so I can get more ajr. I want it multiplied. So what you've basically told the poor person is, don't eat for a few months, okay? Make sure, just stay hungry for a few months. Your electricity bill, just don't pay it for a few months. Your medical treatment, let's hold off on it, because I want to get more rewards in Ramadan. So this type of, it's a mercantile business approach. It's like an excessively, transactional approach. That's a good word. We don't realize we're actually killing this very spirit of zakat itself. One of the big problems, I used to do some work for National Zakat Foundation. One of the problems they used to say is that you can only get people to pay zakat in Ramadan. Yeah. Because why? Because that's the only time you make them feel guilty for not paying zakat. So even this zakat seminar should not be taking place in Ramadan, because it's solidifying the idea, but we're doing it because this is the time when everybody will come. But what happens is now in the minds of people, it's Ramadan, I have to pay zakat. Now the problem is, they spend their zakat on the poor, these organizations. Let's say you start with $2 million in zakat, and people will come and they'll distribute. Well, what happens by the time the next, later in the year? What happens when that time comes around? No zakat is coming in. They run out of zakat. So that means for the last 2, 3, 4 months, there's no way that they can provide for the poor. Whereas if we were working on a basis where whenever your personal, because you cannot say not everybody got $8,000 at the same time in their lives. Somebody got it when they started working in the summer. Somebody got it when they inherited in the winter, for example. So then you would have been distributed, and the poor would have always been taking, and the coffers would always be flowing in. And the second thing is this. I actually believe it's very harmful to make a Ramadan zakat paradigm. You know why? Let's say you paid a few $1,000s in zakat in Ramadan. What about charity? You'll say, I already paid my zakat. When you offload thousands of dollars in 1 month, then you don't pay sadaqah, because you say, I already gave my sadaqah. So had you paid your zakat outside of Ramadan, when you come in Ramadan, then you would have said, now I really need to give something.
Yeah.
You see? So actually, zakat in Ramadan reduces charity. Because what happens? We say, we go to people, say, donate to the masjid, because the masjid needs programs, and they say, okay, can I make it a zakat payment? Technically speaking, as we'll speak about, according to the dominant opinion, you don't give zakat towards operations. It has to go in the hands of the poor. I cannot use zakat to buy Qur'ans to distribute. Okay? So what ends up happening is everybody says, oh, well, I need to pay my zakat first, so I can't give to the masjid, I can't do that, until they find someone who says, okay, I'll take your zakat anyways, for operations. So what happens is, this is actually reducing the amount of charity that we're supposed to give, right? In Ramadan, you're supposed to give the voluntary charity, not the one that you have to give, right? So there was a question over here.
Just to add to that, like I'll make it very explicit. I do not believe you get extra reward for paying zakat in Ramadan. Why? Because Allah didn't make it that way. Like He would have told us, save your zakat for Ramadan. The Rasulullah ﷺ would have acted on that. He would have made that clear to us. The Sahaba would have acted upon that. Why were the Sahaba paying zakat all year long? They, anything the Prophet ﷺ taught, they were immediately, instantly jumping, like, oh wait, it's better in Ramadan, I'm going to do that. They didn't. They paid zakat all year long. And there's a reason why this concept of nisab for hawl, and you have to have $8,000 for X period of time, and as soon as that comes, we pay. And we have, and the obligatory actions, I mean, they're going to be rewarded for zakat anyway. So don't say for Ramadan, pay when it's due. But what's happened is many of us ended up aligning our zakat to Ramadan. And since we're in that situation, alhamdulillah, we make the best of it. But also, like, one more point to add on, like, we get these questions a lot. Hey, look, there was an earthquake in Turkey. There was a flood over here. Can we use zakat money for that? And I feel like what Muslims have done is we've taken 2.5% and we've set that and said, this is everything we're going to give every year. And so if an earthquake happens here, if a flood happens there, there's some need, some new urgent need, some war breaks out in a region, we're like, okay, how do I pull this out of my 2.5%? The 2.5% it's mandatory. We're not doing it voluntarily. We're doing it because we have to. We have to. So when an emergency takes place, can't we look in our pockets and find some extra money beyond that? Maybe make it 3%. 2.5% zakat, but like an extra 0.5% for sadaqah, an extra 1% for sadaqah, because we can't just keep using the same money for now it's going to go to Palestine, now it's going to go to Turkey, now it's going to go here, right? And what happens to local zakat, which we'll talk about as well. But yeah.
Those are very good points. It's like somebody who skips all their fard prayers and does the qada in Ramadan, right? But again, because people have forgotten their zakat anniversary. I mean, someone who's been working for 30 years, do they remember when they first got $8,000 in their bank account? No, sometimes it's hard to remember, like, when did I actually start that anniversary? This is why we say, if you forgot your zakat anniversary, make up your anniversary, right? Same thing, if you forgot your wedding anniversary, just make a day. No, just kidding. But when you make that anniversary, you could choose any date. If you got confused and you don't know when your zakat anniversary is, and this is why, because Ramadan sometimes is the only time people are aware of the Islamic calendar, that's why they choose Ramadan. But if you ask me, the best time is to then choose one of the Eid holidays, choose Ashura, choose Arafah, so that way your Ramadan is clear for pure sadaqah, right? That being said, if you have not paid it and it's due, then give it now, right? Yes. Yes. So what you can do is this. You can say that I want to put aside my zakat. So I calculate my zakat, I put aside that money, and I put it in a drawer or something, like in my mind, or I put it in an account, and then I give from that little bit over the year to different causes. You can do that. But remember, have you given any sadaqah that year? No, you haven't. So you've given to Palestine, you've given to the floods, you've given to the earthquake, and you think I've given all this charity, but you have not given any real charity. Because charity is what comes completely without being compelled to give it. We'll speak about this right now in the next slide. Yeah. There was a question here, and then I think brother had a question as well. So, sorry, you were first?
Yeah.
Yes. Fair? Okay, sure. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So what they say is that if you accepted Islam and you had that amount of wealth, then that day is the day that your nisab begins. So your shahada anniversary, whatever they call it, is also your zakat anniversary as well.
Can you clarify though? Do you pay on that date or?
No. Then you didn't. So that's when you start the clock ticks. When you first cross that amount, your clock starts ticking, and then 1 year from that date, that's when you pay. Yeah. No. So whatever was prior, just like how you don't have to make up the prayers that you missed before Islam, you don't have to pay zakat for the years before. The day you become Muslim, if you have that amount of money, your clock starts ticking, and then luckily, every year on your Shahada anniversary, you just keep paying zakat. Inshallah. So, okay, let's get to that now, the categories of zakat. There is, subhanAllah, I just realized we didn't even read a single ayat of Quran yet. So we're going to,
I talked about
you talked about it.
Ismail.
Oh, yes,
but
yes, yes,
I didn't recite
but
it.
like about the zakat. So, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I'll recite it. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم. Allah says, the sadaqat, in this literal translation, the charities, but what it means is zakat is only for the fuqara, the destitute, the masakin, the poor, and those who are employed to collect the funds, and those whose hearts are inclined towards Islam, and for freeing slaves and those in debt or those in the path of Allah. And for stranded travelers, it is an obligation that is prescribed by Allah, and Allah is the all-knowing, all-wise. There are some key statements here. In this, there are the categories of how many people you can give zakat to. So there are 8 different categories. People think that zakat must only be given to one type of category because we've forgotten the other types. In fact, there were some ulama whose opinion was that you actually have to give to each of those categories every year.
Yeah.
The Shafi'is say you have to give to each of those categories.
Which like you have to distribute across all 8. That was their view.
Which is not easy, right?
Not anymore.
Yeah,
especially not anymore.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, all of these types of categories, all of them actually you can find all of them. So the first one is fuqara, okay, the destitute. And I'm going to give there's different opinions, but classically it means someone who has no income and no money. They're absolutely destitute and poor. And usually these days, you don't find someone like that, but you could. For example, you go, to people who are, you find people on the street with no income, no money whatsoever. That's one type. The next type is the masakin. The miskin is someone who has some level of income or money, but they don't have enough. So they cannot fulfill their needs, but you still see, you still live in a place, you still have some simple food, right? So some people, they draw a distinction. No, the person who has nothing and the person who has not enough, both of them are eligible for zakat.
By the way, what you see on the slide is the opposite of what Sheikh is saying, right? So the first one says the first category has some wealth, and the second one is they have nothing.
Yeah.
So why is that? Is the Sheikh wrong? No, he's not wrong. Is the slide wrong? No, the slide's not wrong. This is because the scholars differed. Some said fuqara are those that have nothing, and the masakin are those that have some wealth. And the other said the opposite of that. It doesn't really matter. Both of the categories are there. So they either have nothing or they have some small amount of wealth.
This is a good question. So usually what happens is if it's like a masjid, like we at ISOC here, we investigate for zakat eligibility. Correct? So our sister knows the entire process. There would be some type of investigation. I can't go too deep as well. So we're not called to go into their mind and their heart to make sure. People can lie. People can lie about it. It doesn't mean that your reward will change if you give it to them. But we try to do homework about this. Now, sometimes you may personally know somebody. You have a cousin back home. You know they don't have that much money. You can ask them. But the thing is, you have to take that risk yourself, because there may be some people who will be offended by the question. So you look in your own, in your own gauge. Does this person look like they have $8,000 of excess wealth?
It's a judgment call.
It's
right?
a judgment
so if
call.
you think you can ask them, they won't be offended, you can ask them. If you feel like they will be offended, you don't ask them. By the way, when you give them the money, do you have to tell them this is zakat money? No, you don't. You don't. So some people, for some reason, some psychological reasons, they may feel offended. Oh, I had zakat. No, I don't want to take zakat. So if you know that's going to be the case, don't create fitna. Don't create an issue for them. Just give them the money. Don't tell them it's zakat.
Yeah. Yep. And you could just ask them, do you possess, more than the 8,000, like the nisab is 8,000, do you possess more than $8,000 in wealth free of debts? You could just ask them that. Right, but the parents are the ones who are paying for. So actually, the one who is getting the zakat would be the parents in this case. It's because you're looking at. Otherwise, every child is eligible for zakat. Every kid, all your kids, line them up, and So then this is why we say it goes by. But that doesn't mean that there aren't children who are genuinely poor. So this is where it comes into, a judgment. Like, of course, there are children who are deserving of it, But here we're looking at a household need, because it's like you're talking about tuition. It's not technically the same as giving people food to eat. Yes. Yes. So we're going to talk about this. These are all Muslims except one of them. There's a talk about this. So the next category. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Okay,
Okay, let's get through the categories.
categories, okay,
Let's
yeah.
finish all 8, and then we'll take the questions, because I think it's helpful to cover all 8. Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Well, yeah,
We'll come
that's
back.
a good question because all the 8 categories will clarify. So the third category is وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا. They are the people who work in the field of collecting and distributing zakat. And it's very interesting because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned those people third. You would think that they would come like last. But after the actual poor people, the people who actually work to do it, why should they deserve zakat? Why do they deserve zakat? The employees who collect it and distribute it, why should they get zakat? That's their life, because they freed their time. They freed their time in order to make sure others get zakat. Because who else was going to walk around and collect sheep from every single house and make sure the sheep are okay? And then, so you would have to hire an employee. That employee, you can actually pay them through zakat. Now that also can be misused, so you have to be careful. Because only the person actually working in the zakat field and actually collecting, distributing can do that. Your graphic designer, so you can't be like an organization, you collect zakat and then you pay all of your employees on that amount, even if they're, the IT guy, that person. It's a person who's actually working in the field of collecting and distributing zakat. And that person does not have to be poor. That person can be a millionaire. That person can be a millionaire, but that's the salary I collect. Because it's a necessity. Islam foresaw that otherwise you would have no one to do the work. Now, alhamdulillah, sometimes you have volunteers in a masjid. You have people on a board that do it, right?
It doesn't mean you just keep giving them money, right? If they're earning a salary from an organization that's different, then like you don't say, oh, I know you're earning a salary. On top of that, let me give you all my zakat.
Yeah.
Like they're not fuqara and masakin. It's only the wages that they're getting from the zakat distribution that's eligible for this.
Yeah, in order to keep them working. So it's not like a bonus as well. Oh, we collected 100,000 zakat this time. You get a little bonus. Go ahead. No. It's what do I need to stay doing this work? And if you only do it part-time, you should not be collecting more than that, right? So this is obviously a judgment call. How much does that person get? And this is where also, sometimes the organizations, if the CEO is, there's different ways of looking at it. Next thing, number 4 is mu'allafati qulubuhum. What it means is actually joining the hearts together. Joining the hearts together. Whose hearts should be softened with zakat? There's 3 different breakdowns of this, and you can also jump in because this is an area of a lot of difference of opinion. Number 1, is Muslims who are given zakat funds to solidify their iman. Okay? So for example, somebody just became Muslim. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, his enemies would accept Islam. But they're not really Muslim. Because they don't want to lose their position, or because they lost a war, they begrudgingly accepted Islam. They're not in, but so the Prophet ﷺ gave them a little gift from zakat to make them feel special, to make them feel, okay, I still have a little bit of, I didn't lose everything, for example. So this was a way to actually bring them into iman. Another example would be what? Somebody becomes Muslim and comes to the doors, accepts shahada. And you say, you know what? We will give this person some gifts for their shahada. We're going to give them a hijab. We're going to give them some books. You know, the little packages that you prepare, where you can bring that out of zakat money and give it to them in kind, right? For example. The next one is a non-Muslim whose heart is soft and they need a little financial assistance. And maybe if you help them, you'll make them feel warm towards the community and they'll accept Islam. Okay, it's not there to pay the mayor and the council officials so they like us, so they give us extra parking. You know, no, that's not what it's for. Somebody comes in and they're exploring Islam, but they've got a lot of financial needs, right? So you said to them, okay, you know, come, you need some help. We'll give you something from the Zakat office. Go ahead. So their heart feels like, you know, because you want to talk to me about spirituality, but here I don't have food to eat. Okay? And the third one, like an evil person to ward off the evil, but that's a kind of a different opinion that I won't go into. Now, there is the opinion, Sidna Umar radiallahu anhu, he actually in his time, it is said that he stopped this category. And he said when Islam was weaker, you know, meaning it didn't have as many people with it. And we needed to use our money intelligently in order to build up Islam's strength. That's when they had this category. But now, he said this category doesn't exist because Islam is strong. Now there's some modern scholars who say we should be bringing this back because now we're in a position again where we do this. But my teachers, none of my scholars permitted this category. I don't know if you have teachers who've permitted this category to be invoked.
I don't have teachers who permitted
yeah.
it.
So basically, Sidna Umar radiallahu anhu closed it. So none of my teachers have wanted to open it back up.
Yeah, some have wanted. I mean, there are things that Umar radiallahu anhu closed. Like we should not see Islam as something that's like black and white, staying consistent over time. Because yes, the Sharia is fixed, but its application does vary from time to time, and we should not mix up this idea of when Muslims have power and when Muslims don't have power. Like there are certain things which we should do when Muslims have power, and other things we should do when we don't have power. So. We should recognize that, and there's some differences of opinion here that we should recognize and maybe listen to and honor. But yeah, the two of us are of the opinion that this, not that this category is necessarily permanently closed, but it doesn't really make sense for some of the movements it's being used for.
Right, but it doesn't mean, from your notes I'm seeing, it doesn't mean that it's abrogated. It doesn't mean that the ayah is no longer practiced.
Yeah.
It's just Sayyidina Umar felt the conditions that require it are no longer prevalent anymore. Yeah. Could there come an imam of all of the Muslims who comes and says, you know, this category needs to be opened up for the strength of Islam and makes ijtihad again with the scholars? Maybe in the future, we don't know, right? But so far, we haven't heard of anybody opening this back up. The next category is wafir riqab, slaves and captives in order to get their freedom. So alhamdulillah, this does not exist anymore, right? This does not exist anymore. There is a modern opinion I'm reading, you know, about, you know, getting legal counsel to pay for the release from jail for wrongfully accused. That's a modern spin on it. But basically the point is, alhamdulillah, there's no more slavery. So this category does not apply. However, it does show you as well how interested Islam was in freeing slaves. Okay? Next thing, wal-gharimin, those who are in debt. Those who are in debt. So people don't realize this, but you can give zakat to someone who's trying to pay off a debt. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yes. If their families are legally poor, so if you're under 8,000, that's Islamically considered legally poor, right? Even though you may not be poor from the societal understanding, but they're eligible to receive zakat. That's how you would look at it. But if they had enough money, then no, right? So the social context may change. One person, the husband is in jail. Another person, maybe they're not earning they got laid off. Whatever it is, the social context is not what matters. It's the financial capability that you look at that point. So gharimin, now, person who has a debt, it has to be a halal loan, okay? A halal debt, a halal need. So for example, I can't just say, and God forbid, like, you know, oh, I took a loan to open a liquor store. Now I need help to pay it off. Everybody give me zakat. I mean, then everybody would just take a loan, start a business, and then collect zakat from the masjid. No, we're talking about someone drowning in debt, struggling to pay it off. This is when you talk about gharimin. Sometimes you have a situation where there's someone in your family. Now, student loans, do they come under this? They actually do. They do. So if you have a cousin drowning in student loans, you can give your zakat to them to pay it off, right? Then again, it's your choice, because many people would feel better giving it to someone who is hungry than to give it to a student who decided to go to an expensive
school. My notes
school.
say it's good for student loan, but not for stupid loans. So I think you were saying like someone opens a liquor store, that would be in the stupid category.
Or I was going to say, someone bought a house and they have a mortgage or something. I mean, then everybody would just use their zakat in paying off their houses, and then the whole spirit of zakat would go away. So we know what we mean. We mean somebody had a medical expense, they had a bill, their father's treatment, now they're stuck with this huge bill, they can't pay it off, their debts are multiplying with interest, and you're helping this person relieve it. That's a very different story, right? Was there a question about, yeah? Yeah, so Sheikh's opinion, like he mentioned, is that you minus 1 month of payments, correct?
Yeah.
And the opinion that the Zakat Foundation, National Zakat Foundation, was that you can minus 1 year of payments. But I think that's a lot. That's a lot. And others even say technically you can minus the entire thing. But
that's a really lot.
That doesn't make sense, because then everybody with a house and a student loan, they wouldn't ever be paying zakat. What's that? Exactly.
Yeah, then anyone would not be eligible.
Exactly.
The reason, so 12 months is a valid opinion. Many people hold it. The reason I protest against it is, well, if you're going to subtract 12 months of upcoming debts, why don't we also subtract 12 months of upcoming income? So if you're going to subtract this many thousands of dollars, then also anticipate your income. So it just seems like it's a very long time.
Yeah.
And the idea here in spirit is it's debt you have due, so you're going to have to pay it. So you don't want to pay zakat and then you can't pay back your loans. That would be a bad situation.
Yeah, and also remember, we now live in a debt culture, right? Back in the olden days, I mean, to take a debt, you use it usually to eat food, to provide for your family, to eat food. And it was considered something where, people who passed away in debt, it was a serious thing. Like the Prophet ﷺ at one point didn't even pray the janazah over somebody who had passed away with debts, but asked somebody, can someone pay off their debts? Yes. Why? Just to emphasize that we can be in debt, but you want to try to avoid it as much as possible, right? So, and it's not like a moral stain on anyone to be in debt, but this is why helping someone who's in a genuine debt is a type of zakat. Even if they live in $1 million home, that's still, you can help them pay off their debt.
Yeah, and for people who have been in debt, how it affects your life, your mental, your situation, your emotions. It's something you worry about every day. And that's why it's, one of the reasons it's become one of the 8 categories, or it's part of the 8 categories. It's a big deal. And the Prophet ﷺ taught us to make dua that we not be in debt. Don't make us lazy, don't put us in debt that overpowers us. So debt is something we should try and stay away from.
And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps, alhamdulillah. Next, yes? Yeah, so, right, so this is the question. If those debts are drowning out that person's income and technically they don't have the nisab and everything, and this is your choice, right? This is why it really is, a choice. Who do you want to give it to? And zakat generally, the best thing is to give it in accordance to need, right? In accordance with need. The next category is fi sabilillah. Fi sabilillah, what does it mean? It technically meant those who are fighting in the path of Allah, meaning in a military capacity. That was the classical understanding. Now, some modern scholars open this up to anyone who's doing Islamic work in the path of Allah. Personally, my teachers did not see doing dawah work as fi sabilillah. They did not allow zakat for these things, but rather they said, give sadaqah. And I'll ask you if any of your teachers had a different view of this. Now, the reason why you don't want to analogize dawah work and legal civil rights work and all these things towards that It's because we need to charge up the Muslims to get into sadaqah as well. Oh, if you don't give zakat to the dawah, who's gonna give to the dawah? Sadaqah, that's what it's for. You see what I'm saying?
And,
So
yeah.
yeah, 'cause- yeah.
A lot of these organizations, by the way, like organizations like CARE, for example, they're not just doing dawah work, they're doing work for us. They're making this place a safer place for us to live. So this is the work we're doing for ourselves. By the way, if we give sadaqah to the masjid, there should be some minimum amount we give to the masjid just to cover the expenses, because we come here and we attend the classes and we go to and we pray over here, right? And so it's not like, oh, this is zakat, this is sadaqah, this is like, no, like, come on, you're using the services. At least pay some amount to cover your own cost, then spend in charity on top of that. And Imam Malik, on this particular issue, he said, the paths to Allah are many. Because fi sabilillah is very generic wording. The wording itself means in the way of Allah, right? That's why people have taken the literal wording and expanded upon that. Imam Malik said, the paths to Allah are many, but I do not know of any difference that is intended here, except that this is referring to battles, right? So we know the early scholars primarily used to see this as only being jihad, defense, fighting in the way of Allah. And then over time, people are like, well, fi sabilillah, that's very general wording. Why don't I apply this to many other things? And so many scholars applied it to something more than that. But Sheikh and I, we were taught, this is only really for battles.
And it can be misused as well. That's the problem. Everybody who wants to make a nasheed album, they say, well, this is fi sabilillah. So you can't collect zakat for that. The next one is Ibn as-Sabil. Ibn as-Sabil is someone who is stranded and they need financial assistance. Now, you'll be surprised. I never came across this category. When I started working at the masjid here, I actually met people who were like, they're coming from somewhere, and they maybe you missed a flight, you missed a bus or something. They need some money to get back to somewhere else. Oh, I need to get to San Francisco because I have to, that's where I'm from, and I'm stranded over here. You don't have access to now people have cards, but this is the story that they give, and I'm sure you've come across this as well, where they say, I'm not from here, and I'm stranded. I don't have a place to stay in the night. They say, I have no place to stay. Can I sleep in the masjid? I say, no, you can't sleep in the masjid. What are you going to do? Then this is where zakat can be used. Get them a hotel room. Okay, here, take this and get yourself someplace. So you can do that until the point where they are able to get back on their way, right, and go. The next one, so this is a summary of the 8 categories. Now, there are unlawful recipients. Those who are rich cannot take zakat, right? So for example, you cannot take zakat as a rich person unless you are a worker who is actually collecting and giving the zakat. Even that should be done to an ethical level. The next one is zakat cannot be given to those who are, well, there's different opinion about capable of earning an income. So let's say somebody just says, I am not going to work. You're totally healthy. You're totally everything. You say, I'm not going to work. I'm going to purposely live off of zakat. Technically, they're eligible. But you should, you might want to consider, because you don't want to create a culture of people who just say, we have zakat in Islam, so I can just quit my job and paint my whole life and collect zakat. Technically eligible, but ethically not. And then the disbelievers. So non-Muslims are not eligible to receive zakat. Also, you are not supposed to pay zakat as a wage. So you cannot say, for example, we are teaching, we have Quran teachers in our Quran school. We will pay them from zakat because it's religious work and this is religious money, so let them do this. In other words, the person receiving does not have to do anything for you to get that zakat. I cannot say to somebody, okay, somebody comes for zakat and then says, and then you ask them, can you just do this and this work for me? I'll make sure you get the zakat. This is an shh. This is an exchange. It's not supposed to be an exchange of anything, okay? Also, there must be tamlik. I have to be able to actually transfer that money into the person's account, give it in their name, give it to that person's possession, and so on and so forth. The exception that I have seen is when you're paying the tuition of someone. So that is counted that they have a debt to the school, and you get permission from that person. Can I pay on your behalf? And it's as though you've given them tamlik.
So can you give zakat to the masjid then?
No, you cannot. So you can give, when you give zakat to the masjid, you're not giving it to the masjid. An institution is not a recipient of zakat. You are making the masjid your wakil, You are making them your trustee. You're basically entrusted them to distribute the zakat. So anyone who says, we are building a madrasa, zakat eligible, this is false. Remember something, it always has to go to a human being in their hand. You cannot build a masjid, a madrasa with it. What some organizations do, they use what they call hila, a legal trick. So what they do is, they want to build the masjid. So they say, yeah, we're zakat eligible. They take the money, they give it to, one of their employees who is legally poor, take it, put it in his hand, and make him give it right back, and then build with the masjid. That's a trick that they use. They say, well, how else will we build the masjid? How else will we build the madrasa? So, this is the question, right? This happens when the community is not trained to give sadaqah for the sake of Allah, right? Yes, so this is an example of where, so for example, you can give zakat in kind, meaning I don't have to just give cash. I can buy bananas and give that in zakat, for example. So some people, what they do is they say, okay, we have zakat, we're gonna sponsor, we're gonna buy meat for the whole year to feed the orphans, and that's fine because you're giving them something. But it cannot be that, we're paying the teachers on behalf. No, you can say that the orphans have a debt to pay in tuition, so they're getting that money that way. But it's not to be spent on like programs.
A couple of other quick topics that we can touch on. So prioritization of zakat. The scholars, many scholars have either said it's highly recommended or it's obligatory or recommended at least to give zakat to those that are close to you. What does it mean, someone who's close to you? Relatives, okay, what else? Neighbors, right? And so they say family, local area. So this is how you should think about it. Because your family has a right over you more than anyone else. Your neighbor on your right has more right over you than anyone else, than the neighbor on the left, and so on and so forth, right? And so if we're sending all of our zakat to Palestine, well, no one from Palestine is going to send zakat here. So who's going to take care of the local families here? So it's important that we take care of, number one, our relatives, and number two, the local people. But it's important also to understand, when it comes to relatives, who can you give zakat to and who you cannot. So are you allowed to give zakat to your parents? Why not? Because you're obliged to take care of them. Very good. Are you allowed to give zakat to your children? No. Okay? And the same goes up the chain and down the chain. Grandparents, great-grandparents, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. You cannot give zakat upwards. You cannot give zakat downwards. Can you give zakat to your siblings? Yes. Uncles, siblings, nieces, nephews, in-laws, all of that is good. Cousins, no problem. Can you give zakat to your wife? No, because you are obligated to spend on her. How about can you give zakat to your husband? Not sure. Yeah, it's tricky, yeah? You see, this is why you also find the difference of opinion in the scholars. So the Hanafis say what's going to happen. The wife's going to give zakat to the husband. Husband's going to take that money and spend it on her. So it's very self-serving, right? So they say no. They say no. Makes sense, right? This is logic behind it. The wife cannot give zakat to the husband. But the other three madhabs say that you can. But the Hanafis, it's a pretty sound argument there that you probably shouldn't do that. So we should try and give, again, zakat to our relatives and people who are close to us.
Also, there's a couple of other categories that I forgot to mention. The other one is someone from the Ahlul Bayt, from the family of the Prophet ﷺ. They don't collect, they're not allowed to take zakat. But what does that mean? Does that mean, and with all due respect, does that mean everybody with the last name Sayyid can't collect zakat? Right? Yeah, because there's lots of Sayyids now. And actually, it's not if your last name is Sayyid, or if your grandmother once told you that because there are many people who can have the lineage of the Prophet, and it's a very blessed thing. And it's a very honorable thing, mashallah. But it's someone who can trace their lineage paternally back to the Prophet ﷺ, back to Fatima and Ali radiallahu anhu, or the other families who are Ahlul Bayt. Okay? So this is you have to have that lineage going back, and once you're sure of that, then you do not collect zakat. There are some opinions that allow the Sayyids to give zakat among each other, or in a case where the state has stopped supporting the Sayyids and there's need. But the better thing to do is to do that from sadaqah. And this was done why? To ensure that the Prophet ﷺ was not seen as personally benefiting from the zakat, him and his family. So Allah Akbar, the Prophet ﷺ is the one who instituted it. Right?
Yeah, a few miscellaneous issues, and then we can open up to more questions. Intention, when you give zakat, you have to have the intention that you're giving zakat. You can't say, you know what, there was a fundraiser going on at the masjid, I gave $500, and then an hour later you're like, oh, wait a second, I have zakat money to give. I'm going to backdate my intention. There's no backdating the intention. You have to have the intention prior to or along with giving the money. You can't come back afterwards and change it to zakat. Paying zakat incrementally, we already talked about that. You can pay it incrementally. Paying zakat in advance, we said we can do that as well, but not so far in advance that you're crossing your anniversary date, right? So it has to be from one anniversary to the next anniversary. Making up for past zakat, a lot of people ask about this, is, I didn't know this is how zakat works, or I wasn't, I was ignorant. How do I make up for it? You just do the calculation as if you were back at that time. So you say, okay, my bank balance at that time was this much, I had this much in assets, you add it all up, you calculate the nisab from that date, and whatever amount of dollars you have, you don't have to inflation adjust it, you just give the same amount right now, and so you can make up for the past zakat that you might have missed. And then fixing zakat paid to somebody that was ineligible. So maybe you learned the 8 categories today, some details about that today, and you gave zakat in the past that was outside of those 8 categories. If you were completely ignorant about it and you didn't know, my view is, inshallah, that's fine. That's already been given. What's done is done. But if you knew about it and you still gave it to the wrong category, then you have to fix it. Regardless, make tawbah and istighfar, and Allah is not going to hold us to account for more than what we can bear. And so if it's something that we didn't know about, that's okay, inshallah. Okay? And I think that's all I had. I don't know if you had.
I'm sorry? Sure. So no, you cannot use zakat as like emergency funds for like a calamity that comes up for a person, because, for example, they may need medical treatment, but they're legally rich, like Islamically they're rich. So the thing to do is to incur the medical bill, and once they're in debt, then you can give them zakat for it. But you cannot forward zakat for an upcoming expense.
Once they're going to incur a bill, right? They have a procedure.
So then what you would do is take a loan from a private individual, and so that person ends up in debt. They can then collect zakat immediately, and then they pay it that way. Yeah,
so
I mean, this is the whole point, that because the fact is, then it just becomes an emergency fund for anything. Because then you can say, like, where is the threshold at that point? Like, I can say my car needs like fixing. Where are we gonna draw the line? This is why, like, legally speaking, I know, like, emotionally it's very compelling. It's very compelling. But legally speaking, how are we supposed to draw a line at, like, when is a surgery needed? When is it emergency use, like this? It's very difficult. But the point is that we cannot always find a legal solution for taking something in advance, because we just how can we do that? Otherwise, basically what we're saying is, everybody who's going right now for medical treatment, we should just be draining the zakat account and prepaying their medical bills, all of them. We can't do that. We have to actually make sure they land in the debt itself, and then we do it. But it's true, it's very difficult. Somebody, the hospital is saying, no, give us 10,000 or we're not going to even start life support. That's very difficult. Emotionally, it's very difficult. Like a service that does it. So National Zakat Foundation, I know. I don't know here if they do it, but
For free?
yeah, free consultation. Like they actually get you on the phone with a mufti, and you can actually and then it's expected that you would give them the zakat. No, I mean in America, I know the National Zakat Foundation in Canada has, and they're all the same. England here, it's still the same general idea, which is you can book an appointment with a mufti to do that, like kind of get your taxes done, so to speak. Yeah.
The right question to ask is not to ask people, are you zakat eligible? Because we started the session by saying this is one of the pillars that's the most ignored and has maybe the least amount of knowledge amongst our community. And so a lot of people have misconceptions about zakat. So probably the best thing to do to find out if someone's zakat eligible is not to ask them if they're zakat eligible. Rather, ask them if they have, besides your house and furniture and car and all these things, do you happen to have like $8,000 in like cash and investments and this kind of thing? And that's how you can make that determination. And if you feel like that question is going to be offending them, then try and judge to see if you think you can figure it. Now, it might be hard if they're in Pakistan, you're here, right? But you have to try and use best judgment to try and figure that out. The question is, do you pay zakat on a business investment, right? So it depends on what you're investing in and what type of investment is it. So Islamically speaking, a loan is not going to be an investment, right? So we differentiate, and in fact, in the books of fiqh, we put loans in the chapter of sadaqah. The Prophet ﷺ was reported to have said, if you give someone a loan, in one of the narrations, it says, if you give someone a loan, it's as if you donated them half that amount in charity, right? So it's a type of charity. And then we have investments, which are over here, which is in a completely separate chapter, where our intention is to make money. The intention here is to do something solely for the sake of Allah and help someone. And the intention there is for us to make money. And also we should add intentions to create jobs and all of that as well, right? So when we're investing, generally it's an equity investment where we're going to get a portion of that business. We might own 5%, 10% of that business. So then you just treat it like zakat on business. So you ask them, hey, how much cash, accounts receivable, inventory do you have? You multiply that by 10% because you have 10% of that business, and multiply that by 2.5%. Most investments are going to work like that. Sometimes the thing you're investing in is a store of value, just like gold or silver or cryptocurrency. So if you're investing in something like that, you're going to have to pay on the entire market value. The third type of investment, which is not so popular nowadays, but I'm trying to make it popular, is a type of investment called mudaraba, where what you do is you give someone money. You don't get an equity share in the business. What you get is a profit share. So you give someone, like, let's say you give them $100,000, and you say, whatever profit you make out of this, I'll get 30%, you get 70, or you get 70, you get 30, I get 70, whatever, some profit share. In that case, you're the capital provider, so you're paying zakat on that. They don't pay zakat on that. They're increasing, alhamdulillah, it's increasing in the marketplace, but most investments are equity investments where you treat it just like a business. Yeah, the question is about mudaraba. Mudaraba is, it's considered, like, you can call it profit sharing nowadays. And so if you're going to do a profit sharing agreement, there's a capital provider, and then there's the person who's doing the work. They're the sweat, the sweat provider, right? And so one person provides money, the other one provides the sweat. And yes, you have to have a clear agreement. There's conditions around it. You have to define upfront what you're doing with the money if it's a restricted mudaraba, and then you also have to talk about how you're going to share the profits upfront. It's not revenue sharing, it's not capital sharing, it's profit sharing on gross profit. Yeah, there's a way to structure that. The question is personal loan versus business loan, and consumptive loans versus productive loans is, I think, is a more technical way to describe it. Some people like to try and differentiate between them. A loan is a loan is a loan in Islam. And so the way we look at it is there is no loan with interest. Actually, the reality of the situation is every single loan does have interest on it. You know why? Because Allah says in the Quran that when you give a loan, you're going to get an amazing return on the Day of Judgment. So there is actually a different type of interest. The reward that we get is reserved for us on the Day of Judgment. Every charity, we get something back from Allah, which is much greater than what we actually gave. But in terms of, from a dunya perspective, a loan is a loan, and there can never be interest on it. And they're all viewed exactly the same way. The question is, what if you take a loan against your 401k? And so the way that that works is you're taking a loan against your own account. And so you have an account that's the 401k, and you're pulling money out of it, and then you have to return that with interest, which is perfectly fine because you're paying interest to yourself. Paying money from this wallet to this wallet, it doesn't make a difference. It's not an issue. How do you pay zakat on it? Well, the amount that's going to be in your 401k is going to be invested in stocks. And so you do the zakat calculation, like I said, zakat.zoya.finance, and you calculate that. The amount that's outside of the 401k, I assume it's either in your bank account or in your mattress, or it's used. There's no zakat on it, it's used, it's gone. So wherever that, however, whatever form that $5,000 that you said, whatever form it's in, if it's in a business, you pay based on that zakatable assets of the business. If it's in a bank account, you're paying on that bank account. If it's used up, it's gone, there's no zakat on it, yeah. And we'll wrap up in 5 minutes max, inshallah, yeah. Well, good question. The question is why on a 401k, when you're doing a long-term investment, you pay less, but if you do a short-term investment, you pay more. So reality of the situation is it has less to do with long-term and short-term. It has more to do with what your intention is. And so every item that we have that we pay zakat on, it's either inventory, like it's something that we're buying for trade. Like if I have a shop that sells phones, then all of the phones in that shop are going to be part of my inventory. So I have to pay zakat on all of the phones, the retail value of all the phones that are sitting in my shop. But I don't have to pay on the value of the business, right? Like if I have the ice cream shop example, we were here for that one, right? The ice cream shop, maybe I have, I don't know, $5,000 in the cash register, and maybe I have another $10,000 worth of ice cream that's sitting in the freezers. But if you add up the cost of the freezers, the brand, the building, maybe it's like $1 million, right? But I'm not paying zakat on $1 million. What am I paying zakat on? Just on like $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. That's all, because it's too much of a burden for things that are in use for Allah to put zakat on it. And so the ice cream, a stock, a share in a business, is not different than an ice cream shop. Right? Apple Computers is a large company, or Tesla, or whatever you're investing in. Right? They have cash, accounts receivable, and inventory treated exactly the same way. What we're trying to differentiate between is, are you looking at your stocks as a commodity? Like I buy stocks, I sell stocks. If the stock goes up in value, I sell it. I'm barely holding on to the share. It's in and out like inventory. So my stocks become like inventory. So when my stocks themselves become inventory, I pay 2.5% on that. But if I think of my stocks as it's a business that generates a profit, that gives dividends in the long run, the long-term value of the stock itself is based on its profitability. If you ever look at the value of a stock, it's measured as, the analysts say, the value of a stock is equal to its future cash flows discounted. So it's based on the profitability of the business. So if you think about it as a business, and so the proxy that the scholars have come up with is, if you are holding it for the long term, now you're actually thinking about it like an investor, like a business. I care about the profits. Are the profits going up? Are they going down? Is it going to go this way? Is it going to go that way? Versus if you're buying it for the short term, you're not thinking like an investor. That's why we don't call them investors. We call them day traders, because they're just trading, right? It literally matches into the Islamic paradigm of an article of trade, you're going to pay full 2.5% on. Does that help answer the question? Yeah. It's exactly that, yeah. Yeah, it's a fixed assets versus inventory, yeah. Yeah. Inventory is just the way, like another way to say inventory is a good that you have for trade, right? So if I have a Rolex watch that I just bought because I think it's going to go up in value, I probably don't call that inventory, right? But I know I have it for trade. I buy it, I'm going to sell it. It's like it's that type of investment, right? I bought it and I'm going to sell it. It's something for resale. I think Sheikh said something for resale. So inventory is only zakatable, not because it's called inventory, because it's for resale. Or just for sale, right? Because maybe I made the ice cream. So I took the milk and the sugar and all of that. I made the ice cream. Now it's for sale. That's why I pay zakat on it. So anything that is for sale, effectively, that's the intention. So a day trader bought the stocks, and what's their immediate goal? I need to like sell it as soon as possible. Whereas an investor says, I'm going to buy the shares, and I'll worry about when I'm 60 years old, something like that. Where did the 1 year come from? Yeah, that's a good question. It's ijtihad from the scholars. So this is the view. This is the view of many of the scholars in contemporary Islamic finance. Mufti Faraz Adam, Sheikh Joe Bradford, myself. I'm in Islamic finance myself. Dr. Abdul Bari Mash'al. It's the view that we're very close to adopting as a part of the Fiqh Council of North America. We haven't published the fatwa yet. It's the view that aligns with AOFI, which is accounting standards globally for finance. It's a view of National Zakat Foundation. I saw it in the slide. So it's the view that's adopted. Prior to this, the way they looked at it was they looked at capital gain versus dividends. That was another way they differentiated it. That fatwa was popular in the 90s when people would buy stocks either for dividends or for gains. So it was easy to think about it. Nowadays, the challenge is people don't think that way anymore. They buy stocks and they're not thinking dividends versus capital gains. And in fact, companies don't pay dividends anymore. They look at dividends as a tax event. So what they do is they do share buyback. Share buyback makes the value of the stock go up. So that's how they distribute profits. So it's become very complicated. So based on modern finance, how stocks are viewed and kind of that, they said, look, if you look at tax law, for example, short-term capital gains applies to anything less than 1 year. Because they don't want you to be trading. They want you to be investing. That's why long-term capital gains is 365 days or more. Similar with dividends. Ordinary dividends is less than 1 year. Qualified dividends is 365 days or more. And so many other systems, if you look at the urf, if you look at the custom, what people have adopted, they say traders are the ones who are buying stocks for less than 365 days. Investors are those that are buying for 365 days or more. So that was the ijtihad of the scholars to come up with this opinion. Okay, I think we should wrap up, Sheikh.
Jazakallah khairan to everyone who attended. Thank you, Sheikh Umar Khan, mashallah, for blessing us with your presence and a lot of the interesting information, alhamdulillah. Remember, if there's any questions that you all have, you can still reach out to either of us. I'm new here, so some of the products, Sheikh Umar Khan will know more about some of the products that are particular to this area. But if there's general fiqh questions and so on, you can always see me at the office or get in touch. And alhamdulillah, hopefully this will propel us towards being more aware of our zakat so we can, inshallah, do our duty in a better way and advise others as well to do their duties. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.